The Future of Work Symposium Mini Summit of BIDO Week. A round of applause for the Future of Work. In classic Web3 fashion, we're going to kick off 30 minutes late, and we just changed the schedule a little bit. I'd like to not waste any more time and bring up the founder of Opolis and founder of ETH Denver, John Paller, to kick us off. Woo!
Come on. There we go. Good morning, GM. How is everybody? Who's been here more than a day? Y'all tired yet? Nah, come on, man. This is like pregame warm-up. This is like tailgating in the parking lot. You kidding me? Who's been over to the Biddle Hub? Pretty cool? It's warm-up. Y'all ain't seen nothing yet. I've seen it, and it's pretty amazing. What is this? Can we get rid of this? That would be good. Okay. So if you don't know who I am, I'm John. I'm the founder of Opolis, also the founder of ETH Denver. And we have a ton of fun putting on all this stuff for you guys. So hopefully you dive deep and enjoy everything that's happening around you. If you haven't checked out like well, you probably have, but if you haven't checked out the side event calendar, there's like 300 and something things happening in the next 3 days. So like, I would definitely like over-ticket yourself and then just kind of see where things go and YOLO. But it's a ton of fun. First off, before we I'm going to come back here, Josh. I'm going to hang out on your buffacorn for a minute. But wanted to say thank you to everybody who's contributing to the event today. As is common, all of our Web3 friends are slow to get out of bed, so I'm sure people are going to start trickling in here. But just in alphabetical order, Brain Trust, Bullen Network, Collabland, Coordinape, Daring Advisors, DAO House, DXDAO, ETC Soft, Hyperplay, Job Protocol, Meta Intro, MeDAO, Non-Fungible Council, Launch Legal, Raid Guild, Red Request Network, Save, Shapeshift, Superfluid, and Upside Co-op. So holy shit. Thank you guys for everything and your support. We very much see the future of work as a collaborative exercise, and we absolutely would not be able to put on this event without y'all. So thanks, guys. We appreciate it very, very much. Now, as far as my basic sort of like introduction here, we're just going to kind of get rolling to kind of save time, so I'm going to kind of abbreviate what I was going to talk about. But I say quite a bit that Web3 is synonymous with the future of work. And what I mean by that is the ethos, the tools, and where we're going as a culture in Web3 is going to attract millions and millions and millions of people from Web 2, if you want to call it that, or normie land, if you prefer that. But we're going to basically create opportunities with these Web3 tool sets that have never existed before. Now, when people are deciding where to put their time and attention commercially, they're always looking at what the best value is to arbitrage their time. So in the Industrial Revolution phase, post-World War II, it was fashionable, if not economical, to contract your time to big corporations because it was much easier to make good money, retirement, and all sorts of other things that were good for safety and security for the average person. And then you fast forward 70, 80, 90 years, depending on when you want to start the clock, and we haven't really changed anything that much. But if you look at what people care about, it's no longer safety and security. What they care about is freedom and flexibility. So the current systems that we have are not conducive to where the trends are already going, if not already arrived. So does anybody know about a little law in California called AB 5? Okay. AB 5 is a law that basically California said platform contributors, gig workers, must be classified as employees by the people that are contracting their time. Now, they do this under the banner of like employees' rights and protecting workers. But if you ask the workers how many of them actually want to be subjugated by these companies, most of them don't. So it's the wrong solution to the right problem. So what Web3 really presents with whether it's smart contracts or community tokens or decentralized governance or gamification of work or whatever it might be, we're creating new paradigms of opportunity, economic opportunity, for people to choose and opt in from on a global scale. So this isn't a geocentric thing. This isn't going to be, well, I have to be in Denver in order to participate. You could literally be anywhere with an internet connection and be able to participate. So the landscape of work is going to change fundamentally in ways that might not even be fathomable today. I'll give you one example. Today we have like activities that we do that are fun, and then we have activities that we do that are work. One of the things that you're going to see, the gamification of work that I mentioned, everything is going to be gamified. You will be incentivized to participate in really boring shit, but it'll make it fun. Opolis is a good example of that. That's our day job. You'll hear plenty about that today. But we've gamified the basic process of payrolling and made the game participants or the members owners, and you earn value just for consuming basic services, and you're going to do it anyway. This is stuff that you're already doing. So this paradigm is going to end up in almost everything that we do. And so from an opportunity standpoint, we're just barely scratching the surface right now. So if you think about where we are in Web3, if anybody knows me, they know I like baseball. So I use a lot of baseball analogies. So we're in like the first or second inning of a 7-game series. Like we are early. And congratulations, you're actually way ahead of the curve, because from a percentages standpoint, we're talking about most everybody has no idea about this. Even though there's 25, 30,000 people showing up to ETH Denver this year, which is insanely huge, most people still have no clue about any of this. So what can we do about that? Well, we're here to share our wares, to educate, to learn from each other, collaborate, and to have a better understanding of what this future of work is. And by the way, I don't write the book on this stuff. We have some of the most brilliant people here contributing to this, and I'm excited to hear about all this too. I mean, I've got my own ideas. Of course, I've got my own echo chamber of confirmation bias, but the perspectives that we've put together today are diverse and incredibly genius. So looking forward to it. So let's see. I want to give something away, but I got to think about what to do about it. Anybody who's an Opolis member here? Employees don't count. Board of Stewards members don't count. Okay, raise your hands again. Special edition playing cards from Sporkdow. Who else? Where? Here you go. Catch. Watch your head. It's pretty good. It wasn't bad, actually. I didn't take anybody's scalp off. All right. With that, I'm going to hand the microphone back to Joshua Lapidus. Everybody know Josh? Everybody knows Josh. All right, Josh, take it away, man.
Thanks, John. All right, I'm going to hand it right over to the moderator. We've got our first panel. If you guys want to come up. Funkmaster Flex. This is our first time meeting in person. This is awesome. Handles DeFi partnerships at Index Co-op. Do you say Coop or do you say Co-op? I think it's both. And then Jacob Claerhout, the co-founder and CEO at Job Protocol. We have Grady Gardner, the CEO of Distributed Labs, which is one of the core nodes building Brain Trust. We have Lacey Kelani, who is the co-founder of Meta Intro, the professional resume wallet for Web3, and Melip Marilla, who has turned her passion for creating safe spaces for women and girls into a reality, and is also an Opolis ambassador. Here you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. My name's Funkmaster Flex. Obviously, it's not actually Funkmaster Flex. My name is David Garfinkel. People in DeFi know me as Funkmaster Flex, funkmasterflex.eth. I work at Index Coop for a few years now around the DeFi world. I'm an Opolis member. I ran my payroll this morning. But yeah, it's good to have everybody here. Web3 work is a huge topic. When I joined crypto a couple years ago, I just showed up, and now it's a bit different. So great to have all these panelists here. I think the first question is just really like, is it hard to get a job in Web3? What are the obstacles? Like, how does it work?
I guess I'll
Go
start.
left to right, yeah.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I kind of jumped into Web3 head first, knowing nothing about it. I wouldn't say it's hard. I just feel like you have to be willing to not be conventional with seeking a job. So I got into Web3 as a business coach and life coach. And I was really just trying to understand digital trends and how they were moving forward in marketing, and found NFTs. And at that point, I was like, well, let me try it out and see how it works out, and if I can actually teach other people to do this. And so I launched Maternal Instinct NFT, which is focused around maternal health awareness. And I did it the complete wrong way. So I did not build my community. I did not do any of that. I just put out my NFTs and jumped onto Twitter and then learned, oh, there's a right way to do this. But in having done that, it helped me learn a lot about the space, just because I did jump in head first, and it taught me to reinvent myself. So I think when it comes to working in Web3, the easiest way to get in is to reinvent yourself with the things that you're passionate about outside of what Web2 makes you think about work.
I like that answer. We can keep going down the line if you guys think. It was easy when I joined, but I brought all my skills, and then everything was completely different. So.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you want to do and how open-minded you are. I think with Web3, it's such a beautiful thing that you can try a ton of things at the same time. And you, depending on how you jump into Web3, you're almost immediately met with a community. And so, at least for the people that are in our Discord, I see a ton of people come into the space every day that are new to the Web3 space and a little overwhelmed with the options. I'm not sure where their skills will land with a job, but they're immediately met with a community that's supportive. And so, yes, it can be easy if you stumble into the right communities, like Meta Intro.
Yeah, I think I can echo that. Like, it might feel a bit daunting in the beginning, because we tend to speak a certain lingo. We try to, the fact that we are very community focused makes it such that sometimes if you're not part of a community, it might feel like it's really hard to get into, but actually it's just joining the conversation, learning. Everybody seems to be very open-minded. We at Job Protocol help people find full-time jobs in Web3, and there I would actually say that it's very much like finding a job in a tech scale-up or in a startup. You just need to understand a bit, okay, what are the slight niches that Web3 tends to focus on. I think, obviously, if you're a developer, you need to know what's happening in terms of tech stacks and which types of contracts are being innovated, who's building what, and that requires you to be somewhat knowledgeable, and that could be a barrier to entry, even though there's a ton of really cool projects, boot camps that can help you get up to speed there. And then on the marketing biz dev side, it's basically just coming to eDenver, right, and join the conversation, learn about what it takes and who's doing what where. Because yeah, all that to say that if you put in a little bit of effort, I don't think it's that hard to find a job in Web3. And there's a really big demand for 10x people to try and build this into a billion users.
Yeah, so maybe a little background on me just to give you guys reference point on this. So I've been working the last 4 years at Brain Trust, helping to build basically a giant decentralized talent network. What is that? That basically means we're connecting talented people, usually in the tech, so product managers, designers, engineers, with companies who need them, spanning kind of both Web3 and Web2. So everywhere from Fortune 500 companies like Walmart, Citibank, Allstate, Nike, Google, et cetera, all the way down through Web3 startups hiring their first engineer. So over the last probably 4 years, I've probably helped, 1,000+ companies hire 10,000 or so people. Of that, probably 150 of those are crypto Web3 companies hiring everything from engineering through digital marketing through anything that they might need. So my experience has kind of spanned both sides, and a ton of it in the last 2-3 years. The main thing that I've seen for difference in getting a Web3 job versus Web2 is they're very similar, right? the hard parts about finding a job, like finding a job sucks just in general, like no matter what you're doing. It's partially what we're trying to help with, but the difference that I've seen here is like you got to find something you're super passionate about, and most of these companies, if you're going to like just a straight pure Web3 startup or kind of like maybe mid smaller size company, like everybody just wants passionate people. Like nobody fucking has experience with Web3. No one has experience like working at other organizations that have built out a lot of things in most cases, or a very small number of people, and they're just looking for transferable skills who can come in and get excited about what they're building on, jump in with the mission, and go start to try and drive a difference within in that little organization. But I think the main thing that I've seen is like, if you show up with passion and excited to learn, and like you don't need any experience whatsoever, like you're good to go.
I definitely agree. The skills you have now are going to be different than what we call Web3 in 5 years. So whoever says they have as many X years experience probably isn't going to make a whole lot of difference, but hopefully it does at least. A few of you guys mentioned community. There's a lot of different like job sectors within crypto, I guess. To me, like community was a big one that popped up. Most people don't think you can work business development or marketing. I've worked business development for the past 3 years in crypto. So you guys mentioned community. Lacey, you mentioned it first. Is that just a buzzword, or are there like things within these crypto companies that actually bring in community?
With community, because it's Web3, community is super important. I wouldn't say every single Web3 company that I've come across puts community necessarily first, depending on what they're building. So like with us, with Meta Intro, when we went out to build, we decided to build the community first for a few reasons. First, to see if there'd be any interest in the product that we were building, and then B, help people find jobs. And so again, it depends on what you're building, but for a slew of companies in the Web3 space, community is super important and a great job to have if you're able to land it.
Agreed. Community was one of those words I thought was made up when I got into crypto, and it certainly isn't. So it's good to hear that. Jacob, you guys said you guys are trying to get people to get full-time jobs. Is that all of the crypto landscape? Are there freelance part-time jobs? I feel like I know a lot of people that work at 5 different DAOs. So how do you guys think about it?
Absolutely. So we were first, back when I got started working in Web3, first an NFT game, but okay. After that, we started with building a platform where people could create and curate professional credentials. And there, it's actually on trying to figure out how to do that we learned, okay, a lot of these great projects out there, like, even though they have a community and very often they're open source, you can come contribute to both the code and even like some of the sales and BD orgs. The best projects out there, the ones that create a lot of alpha, actually have core teams. And these core teams are recruited full-time. Those are people that are willing to put their life and their heart and their personal brands behind the mission of a certain protocol company project. So we decided to focus on that because there, let's say, it's also where, let's say, the overlap between Web3 and the regular recruitment community was the most prominent. And just for context there, what we do with Job Protocol is basically we're a decentralized recruitment network where we partner with companies like The Graph and Gnosis and Binance to help them find full-time employees. And we have an ecosystem or a community of talent partners, we call them, and they take on very wide shapes. Like we have freelance recruiters, we have agencies, job boards, communities themselves that are focused on a certain niche and that want to help facilitate making connections and get people hired in exchange for earning a bounty. Because what a company does is they come to us, they list their hiring spec, we put that on chain and let them attach a bounty, and then those talent partners that I mentioned can come in and earn those bounties. So yeah, I would say the full-time spectrum, I think a lot of us have a full-time job, if not like really cool. I really believe in the fact that people can be multifaceted, have multiple jobs. But for us as a first niche, as a first wedge, we focused on full-time contributors.
Yeah, so we see a lot of full-time through our network, but what I've noticed in Web3 is, a lot of these startup founders are like first-time Web3 founders, oftentimes first founders. Like, starting a startup in general, doesn't matter what industry you're in, is like difficult and challenging and all these things. So what I've seen is a lot of startup founders for Web3 specifically are actually super interested in like hiring contractors. Like come in, work 6 months, full time. It doesn't mean part time. It oftentimes means 40 hours a week plus. But it's oftentimes a great way for you, as whatever position you are at that company, to like learn if you like it. Do you like working with the team? Do you like the culture? Is what they're doing actually meaningful? All the things that you might do at any organization. But on the Web3 side of the house, like from a hiring perspective, a lot of people coming in like don't have the skills yet, right? Like they're excited, they want to learn, they maybe have some transferable skills if they're a dev, they just got out of, they're very good at Java or JavaScript or something that they could lead into more of a smart programming language. They don't know if they can do it, right? So you got to like learn fast on the job. So like everybody kind of wants to test each other out. So I've seen a ton of people hire, yes, full time for sure, but contracting is a big thing that can be meaningful for you and obviously for them too.
Definitely agree there. As someone who's like hired DeFi people, it's like hard to know because traditional finance is very different, but there are transferable skills. One of the things I always recommended to people was hop into Discord, ask some questions, see what's going on, then see if you like it. Do you guys have any recommendations before you make the full deep dive in of like how you can actually learn in that sense?
I think for me, my process has always started with jumping into the Discord. But I also like to do a deep dive into the white paper and figuring out, what is this company or organization about? What ethos do they have? Does it resonate with what I want to do in the world of Web3 when it comes to equity and redistribution of wealth and creating a system that we've seen that is completely shifting the narrative for what it looks like to generate value? And if they cross those things off, then I get into a conversation with them. And it really is just about finding even a few core people that are in the project and hearing what they have to say. And sometimes even with the people that are, providing value outside from the core team, what's their experience been like? What do they have to say about the project? Why are they still there? And if those things resonate with me, I'm jumping in, whether it's a volunteer role or it's actually looking for a position. It really just depends on kind of the conversations that are being held outside of just saying, hey, buzzwords. So, yeah.
Yeah, buzzwords and salary are helpful, but it's like when you talk to a new team or an old team and their core team's been there for 3 years, they're serious, what they want to do. So you kind of need both sides to be able to get like a long-term core hire. So imagine you do get a job in Web3, and this is probably why Opolis exists, but why is it different? And why is paying people through a multi-sig different? And like, I'm used to it at this point, but that's probably a huge hurdle for a lot of people trying to get into crypto. They're just not getting a normal paycheck most of the time. So do you guys have advice for those type of questions?
Yeah, we see that a lot of our customers, they're willing to be, or increasingly willing to be flexible about that. Like if you want to attract amazing talent, like obviously a bunch of them, like especially the DeFi crowd, they want to be paid in stable. Like they have very complex structure set up where like they optimize for all kinds of things, and very often taxes is an important one there. So you want to be able to accommodate that, but it's a shame to miss out on talent because certain things are not there. And there's a couple of really cool companies, and I think Opolis and some payment providers like are working on, like for instance, fiat. I think Request, who's here, like has me excited about a feature like crypto to fiat bank accounts, payment transfers. We see a lot of like. Especially in our talent ecosystem, we're working there with recruiters and agencies, and these people, for them, like very often starting to work for us just because we pay in stable is a very big hurdle. So like even though I believe in the vision, like we need to make it as seamless and smooth as possible, and there we're doing a good job in getting let's say, or paving the way there. I think the best projects out there are willing to be flexible around, let's say, the payment terms.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, most of these companies operate like a startup, right? Like you come in with a core team, you're relatively centralized, and then you work to decentralize over time. And with that, you're oftentimes needing funding rounds and these type of things early on. So what I see most common is they'll usually give people options. Oftentimes they'll lead with fiat and actually ask them if they're open to some other kind of currency. And you see kind of hit or miss, right? Like depending on your level of comfortability with it. And then what I oftentimes will see is as you get into it and you start working with these companies, you become more comfortable, you start opening your horizons on how you want to be paid, and you start optimizing for certain things, which may lead you into crypto.
Yeah, from my experience, the first time I did my payroll through Opolis, I was like, oh, wow, that's actually way easier than I thought it would be. Because you start worrying about taxes and really everything, and that's not something you normally have to worry about as an employee. But once you start to do it, I think if we're able to give better examples, demos to people, more protocols that are helping assist that process, I think it'll get easier. So when we look at like the Web3 landscape, do you guys look at it as different types of job sectors, technical versus non-technical, or is it just all Web3, dive in and see what you can do with your skills?
I think because of what Web3 is, it goes Web3 and then into technical and non-technical. Like a non-technical individual in some cases might be able to contribute to technical opportunities depending on their skill level, and then vice versa, and that's the beauty of it. So we see a lot of individuals that come into our communities that have this flexible skill level to be able to contribute in multiple ways, and that's amazing, so that an individual then can diversify their types of work opportunities.
I would add to that the fact that we're still very often building infrastructure means that like even the business people, they need to be technical, like, or have at least a certain technical affinity to be able to like DevRel people. Everybody's looking for DevRel people. Like it's really hard to find, but these, like if you're building Web3 native businesses for now, because we're still building out the infrastructure to be able to build like the applications that will scale to 1 billion users. It is still very technical. So I would say that I think of it as like Web3 hiring, whether you're a biz dev or a Solidity developer. What gets me excited is that right now we are starting to have conversations with like Web2 giants who want to tap into what it means to hire in Web3, because they identified that it's actually not one-on-one transferable, like just being able to speak the lingo, like if you're Meta, like it's not that easy to tap into this crowd, right? They throw a lot of money around and obviously have some really cool partnerships, but then transferring the core identity of a company to what this is not something that is done overnight.
Yeah, I would say as someone who came in as non-technical, I think because of my desire to participate in the space and to really understand how effective it can be, I was pushed to learning the technical side of things, right? I had to educate myself, not only to just understand the buzzwords and the key things that I'm trying to learn to be able to translate it to people, but to really internalize what it is that I'm working towards and what the ethos is. And so I think because of where Web3 is, there is this need to learn more about the technical side to be able to translate it in a way that actually makes sense to people who don't want to learn about the technical side of things. And anyone that's coming in at this stage has to, in a sense, be a builder on both ends.
Yeah, for me, it's, I think of it more like, you guys will hear this theme from me, I think of it more like traditional business roles in many cases where, you know, you've got like an infrastructure project or like a, you know, very detailed DeFi project that is going to need people that can go tell a story. They need marketers, they need designers, they need to build a front end that people can freaking use. They need salespeople. Like, they're gonna need a lot of the traditional roles. So I actually think of it very similar to that in most instances. The other thing, to your point, is like when we think Web3, we always kind of think like startup companies or like somebody that's starting something new. Like, guess what? Like every large company on the planet right now has a crypto or a blockchain team. Like every single one of them. So like what I oftentimes will see is people are passionate about the topic. They don't want to go work for a startup because you choose big company or like small company as like a mental shift, doesn't matter what industry. And I see a ton of people going in and taking on these crypto projects within Bank of America or JP Morgan or Walmart, for God's sake. Like everybody's got these projects that exist. And there's a lot of opportunity out there. I just don't think a lot of people who are looking for those jobs like think about that as like an opportunity.
And actually, very often they get looked down on by this very community, but actually they might be the ones that drive adoption for that for that billion users. So.
Recent job posting that I saw that got me excited was Crocs was hiring for their Web3 division. But seeing the innovation for some of these companies that are fan favorites is pretty cool. And so if you want to go work for a large company, there are those arms. You just have to look.
Yeah, I hope Walmart shows up at East Denver this year. Probably unlikely. So I think as a default, Web3 crypto is remote, it's global. But we have these events. What advice would you give to people like just showing up? They never met any crypto people before. What advice would you give to? You see a million booths at these things. What do you actually do?
I would say don't be afraid to look stupid or sound stupid. I think that's the first hurdle. Most people that are new in a space are afraid to say the wrong thing and come across as like the dumbest person in the room. But I feel like that should be your target, to be the dumbest person in the room, because that means you're gonna ask the right questions. Even if they're the wrong questions, you'll ask enough questions that you'll hit the right one. And I think, you know, like Grady was saying, it's about being open to learn and having the passion. And I think the best way to show that is come, be dumb, be ready to learn, ask questions.
If you're coming and you're looking for a job in the Web3 space, my advice, if you're going up to the booths and you have your resume, but let's say this is your first job, asking if there's a hiring manager there or who's ever representing the company, asking, hey, you know, just by looking at my resume, what skills would I need to be able to work for a company like yours? Or what skills do I currently have that would make me a good match with your company? And asking those questions will spark good conversations. And as you get to the second, third, fourth employer, you'll quickly see what skills on your resume are transferable, which is really the first step in landing a job in the space.
Ask questions. Crypto people love talking about their projects, so definitely ask questions. Any like final piece of advice for people who've sort of maybe been in this space for a while, looking to get a new job, looking to see what it might look like in a couple years? Because there weren't job protocols, there weren't resume teams that could help you with these things. So what's it going to look like in a couple years? And like, what recommendations would you give to people looking to build for very long term?
I hope that we won't be speaking about Web3 anymore, that like it will just be part of like we build valuable systems and how we build innovation. I think as soon as we become part of the normal tech stack, as like every software business will be a Web3 business, that's I think a shared belief here. So I hope that 10 years from now, everybody will, especially if you're a technical person, like you'll need to be a Web3 native person. On the business side of things, yeah, let's hope that we reach enough usage and that like some of the thinking as to how we think about value creation and ownership that on the internet that becomes normal. And the only way of doing that is by getting enough smart people on. And I think we all have a shared responsibility to bring on board the people that are still working in jobs that they're not particularly excited about, and come join this ecosystem where your work very often is closer to your heart than just doing, I think John mentioned it, like just exchanging your time for money. I think what we're doing here very often is closer to our hearts. It's and therefore we give a better version of ourselves. And if we do have enough smart people do that, then for sure, like reaching that 1 billion people will be, I don't know, I hope less than 5 years away. So that we can just stop talking about Web3.
Definitely less than 5 years. I like the word, or like the phrase, ownership economy, maybe rather than Web3. Everyone used to say crypto. No one likes to say DeFi anymore. So we'll probably have different buzzwords as we keep going. But
Yeah, I think it'll just be more normalized, to your point. This is the same advice I would give probably 5-10 years from now to somebody who's here today, which is go find something that solves a freaking actual problem. And talk to them, right? And ask hard questions. Like if you're new to this whole space, like you're gonna start asking like say a founder or somebody that works for a company on a core team and has been in the industry for a couple of years, like they're gonna start throwing weird acronyms at you and like shit that makes no sense whatsoever. Like ask them to pause and be like, can you tell me like what that means? Like don't feel stupid doing that. Oftentimes people will throw a lot of this stuff at you just to kind of like move on past the topic. And you're like, can you tell me like what you're trying to solve? Like, is there a problem here and like, that's where I would go try and spend my time trying to find a company that solves a real problem with people you like.
Agreed.
I think on top of what he's saying is a couple years ago, last year, time has moved. Last year I heard someone saying Web3 is a permissionless space and everyone should feel that it is and just jump in. But one of the things that I realized made me feel like that was an incorrect statement was the big words that we're using. Because we're using big words and we're using jargon, people don't feel the permission to come in. People don't feel like they can just jump in. So I think the onus is on us to make our language accessible, to make the way we communicate equitable for the people that, honestly, this isn't where they work. You know, we need to bring it down to where they are and how they exist and make that feel like, oh, this is something I can relate to. This is something that I can contribute to. And like Grady said, then if they know the problem well enough with the words that resonate with them, then they're willing to step in past feeling like I need permission.
The last thing on this is I have found anyone who's like a good Web3 founder or crypto founder actually can get out of the buzzword stuff. Yeah. They can actually talk to you like a person. They can make it sound real to you and communicate with anyone. Like those are the good ones out there.
Definitely. Push them on the acronyms for sure. Well, this is very helpful to me. I'm sure it's very helpful to everybody else. Thank you to all the panelists. Seemingly we have a few more coming up here that'll be good. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Are not your lawyers. So first, let's bring up our moderator, Bill Warren, who's the product lead at Opolis and an executive steward. I had to read that off a sheet. Known the guy for years. Come on, let's get some laughs. That was supposed to be funny. There we go. All right, Josh Hale has been an attorney speaking about startups for the better part of 20 years and recently changed the company name to Fungibility Group. That's a great name for a law group. Adam Miller, the CEO and co-founder of MyDAO and the host of Just DAO It podcast with a special guest whose name is? Goldie. We're very touched to have Goldie on our panel today. Tyler Morey is the co-founder and CEO of Upside Co-op. And Yev Muchnick is a managing attorney at Launch Legal and a member of the Employment Commons Board of Stewards. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill Warren, a recovering attorney himself.
All right. Thanks, Josh. I figured we could start out by just everybody giving a little bit of background on themselves and what you're working on primarily right now. So let's start with Yev and work this way.
I'm Yev Muchnick. I've been practicing law for 15 years this year. Focusing primarily on corporate and securities and early stage tech startups, growth stage tech startups. I've been in the blockchain space since 2016, and we formed the first DAO co-op here in Colorado, which was the Employment Commons in 2019. So I'm pretty proud of that.
All right, Tyler Morey, there we go. Co-founder, CEO at Upside Co-op, aka Upside Coop, I guess, because that's what we're calling those these days. These are attorneys, and they are not your attorneys. I am not a lawyer, so don't ask me any questions. Upside Co-op, doing regulatory compliant community ownership for everybody.
Hey everyone, I'm Adam Miller, and I'm a co-founder of MyDAO, which is a company that's working with the government of the Marshall Islands to try to create the best legal and regulatory framework in the world for DAOs and eventually for digital assets. It starts with our DAO LLC, nonprofit and for-profit that we offer for DAOs in the Marshall Islands.
Hi all, I'm Josh Hale. I have been practicing law for nearly 20 years. I think that's 20 years next year. And for most of that time, I've been doing works in startups, even though I'd practiced some other areas of law when I started. And got pulled into Web3 about 4 years ago with one of the clients that I had that I was part owner in that wanted to do something with comic books. And I knew nothing. And I jumped down the rabbit hole, and I'm here 4 years later and having fun conversations with all you guys.
So like Josh said, one of the questions we hear a lot in the Web3 space, especially with respect to DAOs, since people actually work for DAOs and get paid by DAOs, is should DAOs have an entity structure? And if so, which one should they have? And let's start with Adam, because it sounds like you have an opinion.
I do have an opinion, definitely biased, but I do feel strongly. I mean, first of all, that every DAO should, okay, not every DAO, but most DAOs should have a legal entity, right? They should incorporate in some way. And there's really three reasons for that. One is to limit the liability on their members as individuals. Two is so that the company, the DAO, can own property, like its own name, its own logo, and do things like open bank accounts if you want to. And three is that the DAO can pay its own taxes so that you don't simply have pass-through taxes on all of the members. Now, a DAO LLC or other legal entity for a DAO goes great with Opolis because there are reasons why the ideal scenario is for the DAO to have a legal entity and for all the contributors that are working as contractors to have Opolis legal entities. But neither one is really sufficient, in my opinion, without the other.
And Yev, we'll go to you next, because I know you have an opinion.
I'm going to quote Bill Warren, and sometimes you just have to YOLO your DAO. So, I mean, there are times when a legal entity wrapper doesn't make sense, and you can have a community that is not, potentially in charge of a treasury, but that's more of like a social community that runs on Telegram or Discord that, it overcomplicates things in certain situations to wrap yourself in a DAO, but I'd say for 98% of the time, it does make sense to find some kind of legal wrapper that's right for that DAO. And there's so many different types of DAOs, right? There's investment DAOs, there's producer DAOs, there's developer DAOs, there's just a myriad of different types of DAOs. So I think looking at really what kind of the community base is like, the kind of flow of income and flow out of potential income and distributions really guides kind of the proper legal entity that you should be looking at. We're huge fans of co-ops in Colorado. They are incredibly flexible, adaptable. They provide the legal liability protection that a lot of DAOs need. I will save my securities analysis for a little bit later, but there's a nice little securities exemption that's built in as well. So.
Yeah, and let's go to Josh next.
Yeah, so I'm kind of on the other side of that equation as an attorney. I think that a very simple analysis of should a DAO have a wrapper is, one, is it conducting business, and two, is it a sole proprietorship, which obviously would not be a DAO. Sole proprietorships, when it's all said and done, they can have a LLC or whatever, but they still may be able to pierce the corporate veil. In a DAO, if you're doing business, you should probably just suck it up and do it. Doesn't necessarily mean any particular form, because that question is obviously the legal answer of it depends. But with that being said, if you're conducting business, you probably want some form of legal wrapper. And business generally equates to is dollars being transacted or some currency being transacted. If you're not doing any, exchange of currency, then like what she was saying, if it's just social in nature, then there's not really a great amount of risk. But the second you're transacting, you may want to have that thought process and maybe even want to talk to a lawyer, God forbid.
Yeah, and Adam, I'm guessing you're in the co-op camp, but how are co-ops or coops? I'm not getting on board
Tyler.
with that. How is that working for
You talking to
DAOs?
Tyler?
You're talking to me.
Or,
yeah.
sorry, Tyler.
Ooh,
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Yeah, no, I'm firmly in the co-op camp with Yev for a lot of reasons. A big one is the securities exemption that Yev alludes to. The other is that the other options for forming a DAO generally don't, like if you're going nonprofit and it is meant to be a for-profit business, you're gonna have a lot of trouble actually like running that for-profit business. A co-op sits very squarely in the middle, where it is not traditionally like for-profit, neither nonprofit, and the revenues and the profits of the actual co-op can go back to the members. But our me Upside Co-op where we sit is really not as a holistic DAO wrapper. We look at DAO startups, I guess I would call them, right? So if any familiarity, people know sometimes like Story DAO or Early Majority or Archive, decentralized museums or consumer products and things like that, where you have a real team, a startup, they're raising money, they're building something, they've got a C Corp or like an LLC on the back end that holds all of these assets, and it can't be a not-for-profit because you're not really taking in VC investment, and doing all that through the tokens, a little crazy business. We sit in the middle. We give a co-op. A co-op really is just to give a formality and a voice to the community and give them an ability to participate in the value that that core business is actually creating. Where sometimes it makes sense to have different entities because you have different types of groups that are contributing here, right? A community is very different from a core team who's building an entire consumer outdoor apparel brand, right? So that's what
Maybe I'll
our
speak
thoughts.
in favor of the DAO LLC for a second as an alternative to the cooperative. The DAO LLC was first popularized in Wyoming. In the Marshall Islands, we took what happened in Wyoming and improved upon it and passed a couple of laws over the last couple of years to create this DAO LLC. What's cool about an LLC and adjusting it for a DAO is that you can do anything you want. Anything you can describe in English in terms of a governance structure, in terms of how you manage the money and the assets of the organization, in terms of how you distribute them, you can do. So what we really focus on with these DAO LLCs is when you do want to wrap the entire DAO in an LLC. Kind of like when you talk about the Microsoft Corporation, you don't say like Microsoft has a corporation and uses it for certain things. You just call it the Microsoft Corporation. Most of the DAOs we work with want to call their DAO it's a DAO. It's a DAO LLC, and it's fully wrapped in the legal wrapper.
All right, and Yev, I think, brought up the sticky situation that seems to be brewing with the SEC. So how screwed are we? Start with Yev.
I think we're fairly fucked.
Yeah. Seconded.
I mean, I think there are obviously carve-outs, and there are ways of trying to protect yourself from securities laws. So for example, a lot of the DAOs that we work with are nonprofit DAOs, right? They have some kind of mission, whether it's the furtherance of an ecosystem or a protocol, governing and supporting something, saving the rainforest, whatever it is. If your primary purpose is really not to generate profit and you're not planning on distributing dividends to your members, then we believe that a token that represents governance in a nonprofit, that's kind of like having a seat on the board of a nonprofit company somewhere, right? The SEC is not going to say that your board seat means that you hold some kind of security. And so, I think that nonprofit...
I would add to that, though, that if you can buy and sell your board seat at different prices, the SEC has made comments that governance tokens are securities. So there's a lot of nuance here.
And I would add to that that if you buy it and sell it for the same price, that might be stable, and the SEC might still be looking at
it's still
you.
a security, right?
So, like in the United States, yeah, kind of fucked. Yeah.
Fucked. But I mean, if you're looking at specifically the Howey test and the prongs of expectation of profits or the efforts of others, going back to co-ops, the efforts are your own. Co-ops are designed for patron membership activity, and so that's where you get that exemption from securities registration or even it being considered a security, and that's sort of the saving grace. So that has not been tested in the courts, and we're hoping that it won't. We're really praying and hoping that it won't, because we've set up a lot of DAO co-ops. But if you think about an investment club, which the SEC has specifically made an exemption for in terms of fund registration, you have kind of in a similar vein, investors making decisions about their investments. And this is kind of what you get in a co-op style situation as well.
And I think Adam, I'm starting to get names right, brought it up a little bit earlier and was shilling Opolis on my behalf, so I didn't have to. The idea of also wrapping your individual contributions to a DAO in a legal wrapper, so rather than just relying on the legal wrapper that is the Employment Commons LCA, I might rely on Billco to protect my personal assets as well, and as I'm working for DAOs, give me a little bit more structure. How effective do you think that will be in really kind of protecting folks?
Can I just jump in really quickly? I would say that a single member LLC, depending on which jurisdiction you're in or forming it in, is very ineffective. And I don't know that that's been openly voiced. I mean, it does kind of give you some legal liability wrapper, but arguably there are certain jurisdictions that give you better protections, like in Wyoming, unfortunately, even though I'm a Colorado native, but Colorado or Wyoming LLCs are much stronger than Colorado LLCs for single member LLCs.
And when you say they're not great for it, you're just talking about the liability protection, right? Because
Correct,
they're effective in other ways, like
They are, yeah, exactly. But for
benefits.
specifically liability protection, yes.
I mean, the way I think about it is really from the DAO's perspective, which is that it's much easier to be able to just hire 1099s, as we call them in the States, right, contractors, rather than trying to build all the infrastructure that you need to be able to hire employees, from a bank account to payroll and paying payroll taxes wherever you have those employees. So I think this enabling infrastructure like Opolis that makes it so that at least you have a little bit extra protection from your DAO's perspective in terms of hiring firms instead of just hiring individuals, and then maybe coming up against like AB5 that John mentioned earlier, where California is going to treat everyone like an employee unless you meet certain considerations. So that's why I think the combination is really great, even from the DAO's perspective.
Strangely enough, in AB5, attorneys are exempted from that, obviously.
Well, there's a lot of exemptions, actually, right?
Yeah, 4 or 5. It's basically professionals with some sort of licensure is the easy analysis. But ultimately, exactly what Yev was saying, for liability purposes, a single member LLC is probably not great. There's other ways you can protect with that, with maybe having additional members, but now you're looking at, how's it held, how's the business, shared, and you start getting into complexities, and the more complex you get with attorneys, the more expensive we get. We love that, but you may not.
Yeah, and what are people's thoughts on the Series LLC? Because within Web3, I think the Series LLC has become kind of a popular, I guess, like legal meme. Personally, I don't think I'd want to be like, I wouldn't want Billco to be a series of some random Series LLC where, somebody in some other series is doing something very sketchy. But my opinion is just one of 5 up here. So curious what others think about it.
I mean, it's pretty siloed liability in terms of a Series LLC. Like if you're gonna go get like a Series LLC NFT wrapper from wrapper.wtf or something like that, it does the same thing that most single member LLC wrappers do. I think the interesting thing about the Series LLC, is you have to trust your counterparty. LexDAO has to continue to pay for filing and everything on the master LLC, or you're shit out of luck, right?
Cali DAO as well.
Yeah, exactly. They're all the same thing to me. But the interesting thing I find there is that everyone, not everyone, and I actually find that it's decreasing at a rapid rate how many people actually care. But there was a day when anonymity was very important to a lot of people in this space. I would say you can never be anonymous to the tax man. Then you're probably doing something illegal. But there are ways in which you can be anonymous to the other people in which you're participating in something with, right? And that's what a Series LLC is kind of cool and good for, is that the Series LLC can be, your instrument. No one knows who owns that. You know you own it, and it can be the participant. It can funnel your participation through that. And that way, the only one who knows who you are is the IRS, and honestly, it's kind of how it should be. But no, those are my thoughts.
I think series LLCs are incredibly efficient for funds, for real estate holdings, for things that you need. You don't need to go and register your new LLC with the Secretary of State so that you can basically spin them up by creating a new operating agreement. I think it can work really well in Web3, but if you are sort of relying on more of a third-party master service, I think Cali DAO's service, I don't know if everybody's familiar with it or not, but it allows you to spin up your DAO incredibly quickly. They've created all of the infrastructure for you to be able to do so, but you rely on a third-party master series, which could potentially dissolve, and that would impact all of the other series LLC. So in that kind of situation where you're depending on somebody and it's not kind of a controlled environment, then there's definitely some risk there. But otherwise, I think for efficiency purposes, we use the Wyoming Series LLC for Buffercorn Ventures as well.
So I think we're really talking about two different things, right? One is using someone else's master, like the Cali wrapper system, and then you're just creating one series within it, and you don't know what all the other series are. The other situation is you're actually creating the master series LLC for your own purposes, and then spinning up series within it for different projects that you're launching. I think the latter makes more sense. Like the former, it's so cheap to set up like a series LLC with Cali that if that's all you can afford, maybe the project literally started like 5 minutes ago, it's probably a good solution to start out with. But then once you actually get some momentum, there's really some assets at stake, or there will be, then you probably want to look at creating your own legal entity. One of the interesting experiences we had with a series from Wrapper was they wanted to use that series LLC as a founding member of one of our Marshall Islands DAO LLCs, and they couldn't pass our compliance process because there was no state registry where our KYC provider could look up and confirm the existence and nature of that series LLC. They could only see the master.
And I'll just add that in Delaware, you can have a protected and a registered series LLC. I think there's only like 19 states in the US that recognize series LLCs to begin with, but Delaware allows for registered series LLCs to actually have their own EIN, and you can do that KYC. Which
You have to apply for it, though, right?
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem is affordability and accessibility, right? And it's like what you're going for. If this is a very simple thing that you're doing and it's just like you interacting with one project and it's like a one-time thing, then it makes sense. Any other time, like if you're starting a DAO or like a business, no. That there's way more complexity that has to be handled. But when it can be $20 and take 5 minutes.
Interestingly, something that Adam said is something that most attorneys will never, ever say out loud, which is if you're starting a project, the thing that may be right for the project may not be the thing that is right for the project a year into the project. And you may have to continue to have conversations with your attorney, and you may have to continue to say, hey, this is the new thing that we're doing. What does this do to what we started with before? And most attorneys are going to point you to what we believe is the long-term correct, right? That's what we're going to point you to, because if we don't do that, we're like committing malpractice, right? But it's a little bit like when your doctor says to you, hey, stop eating bacon, you're fat. A lot of people still eat bacon and have heart attacks, right? Not all clients listen to their attorneys. I mean, do all your never. So, you know, while I can't advise you to go down that path, I can tell you that you should have an attorney flexible enough to help you down that path, even though they're saying, I don't think this is the right way to do this, but it gives you these protections. And then the business side says, those are enough for now or not. The attorney's always going to say, hey, bulletproof. And the business end sometimes has to say, well, we don't need that thing yet. And that's the give and take of a good attorney-client relationship, in my opinion.
Do you tell your clients that it's bulletproof?
I say it's close. Close.
But don't put it on paper, right? Don't put
Never,
it in
never on
writing.
paper. Never on
in writing.
paper. And please say you're not recording this.
Well, I'm not an attorney, so I'll tell you straight, right? But also, I'm not an attorney, so don't listen to a word I say.
And same here, actually, by the way, not an attorney. And it's interesting, you know, our prospects who are thinking about a DAO LLC, they're always asking us questions that are like borderline legal advice. And on one hand, we can't provide legal advice, and we give them like major disclosures about that. But on the other hand, if I hear a question that I've literally heard like 20 lawyers answer the same way, and they've told me that it's probably the same in every situation, I'm going to tell the client, like, hey, like this is what we hear over and over again. This is what we've seen our other clients do. So it's interesting being kind of a services company that's in legal services, but that's not a lawyer.
So I think this is a good segue to what will probably be the final question. But at what point do you bring a lawyer in, or do you rely on the service companies? Because, let's be honest, lawyers are expensive. Most entrepreneurs are in what's in the access to justice world called the massive middle, where they're not qualifying for like free legal aid, but they're also not going to be able to afford Cooley, where an associate's like $700 an hour. So if you're starting a project, you know, when do you rely on third-party services? When is it prudent to kind of bring a lawyer in? How do you manage that cost if you're broke?
Every attorney's going to say day zero.
It's the same as a
First
startup.
thing.
It's build a product, figure it out, see if there's any interest in it, and if there is, then that's day zero, right? So we'll call that one day zero. I'll give Josh that one. But before that's day -1.
And I think also, as soon as you can afford it, is one good way of looking at it, because before then, what choice do you have? And after that point, you probably have something at stake. One of the interesting things that we found, though, is that most lawyers and also tax advisors, and there's at least one in this room, they'll give you a little bit of advice for free because they know that maybe you can't afford it yet, but they're willing to do that to build a relationship with you. So one of the things we've started doing is offering from all the lawyers and advisors in our network, we'll set up a free 30-minute call with that lawyer or advisor and the person who's interested in our product, which is the DAO LLC. And they know that like they're giving a little bit of free advice during that half hour with the hope of maybe attracting a client down the road.
Yev gives tons of free advice.
I do.
She
and
does.
I do give it for Opolis prospective members as well. I've got a 15-minute link that you can schedule with me. But I personally don't believe in lawyers being gatekeepers. I think that you can there's a lot of DIY that you can do. I know that's maybe not the most popular opinion amongst lawyers. I think there are some critical times where you do need one, and when you're touching on regulatory issues, especially when you're raising capital. So if you're issuing securities or you're having securities questions, that's absolutely when you need to engage with an attorney.
Yep.
Never sell a token without an attorney.
Yep.
Yeah.
Never.
And while I agree that DIY is something that is feasibly done, I also would caveat that with saying there's a very fine line between do-it-yourself and now it's going to cost you more later because you did it wrong.
That's true. No, I agree with that. But for example, we got stopped to mentor one of the Blvd teams a couple nights ago, and they had capital that an investor wanted to give them, and they're like, we just don't have the money to set up our entity in the US, and they were a UK company, and I was like, just take the capital. I mean, use a safe note, That's like Y Combinator safe note that is tried and tested, and then you can sort of clean things up afterwards. But there are times when you just have to do that.
Yeah, and just as a shill for big law firms, which I can't believe I'm saying, a lot of them have tons of free resources and educational blogs to help you navigate that DIY stage before you need to bring in an attorney to really deal with the specifics of your project, which are always going to be different from the examples that you can find out there. So I think we are all out of time, but thanks for this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you going to go down the street to Chase on Web3? It's not going to happen. I think what's going to happen, though, is as ownership becomes more people have ownership of their wallets, they're going to be more interested in financing companies and offering credit. And so payroll is the first step to getting people onboarded into Web3. Once they have then a couple of stable tokens or a few ETH, then they're going to be looking for opportunities to maybe invest those or help finance other DAOs, things like that. It's the gateway to the Web3 ownership kind of society.
I'd say that the unfortunate reality is that we operate in a legal system, and that legal system is set up in a way that, like if you look at labor frameworks, they mostly developed in this century, well, in the last century, right? Mainly to protect employees from predatory, working conditions that we previously had. The problem is those regulations are very prescriptive, right? They tell you what a labor relationship should look like rather than creating safe boundaries. And as a result, Web3 employment looks very similar to Web2 employment because it has to, right? And that's unfortunate because obviously we're building payment rails from scratch. We're building everything from scratch. At Superfluid, we stream money every second. Find a labor regulation anywhere that is expecting that, right? And unfortunately, that's how regulation works most of the time. They try to take what exists, the best version of it, and make that the default, de facto way to do things. And that slows down evolution. But things like Opolis that kind of abstract away employment so you could kind of receive funds as a company and then pay yourself as an employee, that's a really good step towards allowing those people to experiment with new ways of employment. And I think the best and most exciting stuff is in the most Web3 native applications, right? So when you have decentralized autonomous organizations who autonomously pay people, that's where it's really exciting. And scaling that is something that we're very excited about at Superfluid. With Superfluid, with one operation on chain, you can open a stream that is perpetual. So you can literally pay a salary from a smart contract with one transaction, right? And that we think will enable a lot of kind of new ways of employment. The question is the regulatory framework that sits in, and that's a question for a previous panel.
So I'm gonna borrow from someone to pay my tax on against the stream of my salary, basically.
Yes, hallelujah. I can't wait to look more at Superfluid. We're really excited about what they're doing, by the way, at Bulla. We have tokens for salary, tokens for invoicing, all that stuff. But I really want to add the streaming element. I think people don't, at first I always thought, wow, business is more discontinuous. How many people are really going to stream? And then I thought about it again, and well, that's sort of my bias. Streaming could be the default, actually. If I start a credit, then it's actually easier for me to pay in nickels and dimes than it is for me to wait 3 months later and send in a big check. So, really cool.
I think in a lot of ways, Web3 payment systems are easier than traditional systems. I think as people in the West, we forget that most people globally are unbanked. And so if you work in Web3 and you live in a country where most people are unbanked, it's way easier to just grab you a wallet address and just send you payment. Versus in a traditional system here, if I were to get an employment, I have to fill out all this paperwork, and then they have to give them my bank statements, and it's like this whole transaction versus Web3 makes that a lot seamless. I think to your point, the hardest part is after you cash out that Web3 for fiat, and then you have to deal with the tax implications and all that and so forth. But I do agree with, I think streaming payments, being able, like for instance, at Coordinate, if you get paid through Coordinate, you can basically decide what do you want to claim your payment, so you can either save it up or cash it out. I think the future is payment flexibility, whether that be claiming it whenever you want, streaming it, et cetera. And I think a lot of ways Web3 is easier than traditional systems, not harder. Because if you've ever been a manager at a retail store or something and you have to do payroll, it's a lot more steps than even paying a treasury in DAOs. So.
That flexibility certainly would give me the opportunity to speculate on when to cash out my paycheck. What are some unlocks that you see these flexibility enabling in more business-to-business payments or like trans-organizational payments, not in this like very structured, one way from an organization to a contributor.
Well, I've been talking a lot about the distinction between public and private a bit. If you want to make payments on chain, whether you're streaming them or using Bulla or Coordinate, that's very a public thing, right? And there's a reason why it should be public. Well, probably you want to monetize it, factor it, do something that would the public would help in that realm. But there's also a private element that I'm seeing creep in a lot more. ZK, all this, privacy layer. So what I'm talking to some people who are interested in integrating Web3 with more privacy, so that if I do make an invoice or I do make a payment and there is a problem with it and we have to go to arbitration, there's a whole layer of privacy that can then be added to, let's say, a Claros court or something like that. So that's, I think, what is really interesting about payments, for me at least, is this sudden discovery, well, we don't want everything public, and we don't necessarily want to stay completely anonymous. Of course, if you're doing business with somebody, you have to trust them by definition, so anonymity sort of goes out the window. So I'm seeing a more of a relaxation with public, private, and payments.
I think one of the bigger unlocks to your question is going to be credit. Like if you look at even small organizations in Web3 who even have some income, right? Or even individuals who have income from Web3, like who's ever got a mortgage backed by DAO payments, right? When's that ever happened? And unfortunately, the truth is traditional institutions are going to continue to fail us in that regard. Like we can't expect banks to start accepting streams as a as a kind of collateral to give you credit. And I think they're missing the opportunity because those are verifiable income streams, right? You can, as to your point of being public, you can check on chain, right? You can see that the money's there, you can see who it's coming from, you can see how long it's been coming from those people. And it's actually very easy to build on-chain primitives for credit. And that's something actually we're exploring with Huma Finance, which are one of the sponsors at ETH Denver. And building credit on top of revenue streams is the big unlock, because that is something where traditional financial institutions continuously fail people. People are unbanked, right? And banking them is important. But banking them is not just allowing them to make electronic payments, right? Banking them is providing credit to them. It's providing financial products based on their income. It's basically giving them the flexibility to, take their income forward if they have consistent cash flow. And all of those opportunities are only there if we use basically crypto for payments, so that all that transaction history is building up on chain, right? And that's an opportunity that I think even a lot of Web3 companies miss, is that making payments public makes your credit history public as well, and making your credit history publicly verifiable makes credit cheaper as well. And long term, that's going to give Web3 companies who adopt this kind of stuff a significant competitive advantage.
Yeah, and one of the most important things I think Web3 unlocks is the governance part. When you look at Web 2 and Web 3, the payments tools, they may look similar at some point, but of course in Web 3 we have the opportunity to have that governed by the people who use it, bring in values or a certain mission, banking the unbanked, or going to markets that are maybe not profitable, or experimenting with new payment reward schemes like Coordinate does, or reputation-based compensation, which can often be bottom-up or a grassroots initiative, but in the traditional legal financial system, you would have a much smaller and maybe differently incentivized group designing those payment systems, right? So even if it maybe looks similar in some ways, I believe the design space is probably bigger, but also the power and the governance of making use of that design space is very interesting, of course.
I think there's just simply a lot of, a lot of areas of payments that are unexplored. For instance, we've just now optimized payments for DAO to contributor, but I haven't seen too many software, too many products specialized in like DAO to DAO payment or sharing treasuries or like organizational level payments. I think that's a space that's just completely unexplored. And also just really simple in the Web3 terms. I feel like it's simpler to pay go to one treasury to another treasury versus in traditional finance. Usually if you're paying another business, it's an invoice and it's a whole big thing. And I think we're all trying to build our individual payment like silos. And I think because there's not enough tooling for collaboration in terms of like treasuries, thus we all kind of go in our own silos and build the same things. And I think building a tool or going into the space of like cross-organizational payment and collaboration will allow for those relationships and collaboration to happen easily between DAOs.
Yeah, I think the composability can be a big thing. Like the stuff Fran was talking about, like your financial transaction history on chain, and then you can layer team level reputation from Coordinate. So maybe you have like a low income, but like everyone you've ever worked with has appreciated you greatly, which is like an indication that you're probably going to be a more reliable payee. So you mentioned the lack of infrastructure for collaboration. What would you want to see built to enable more collaboration on the front of payments and treasury interactions?
I think I would like to see, like my brain always goes to let's find an app that already has a lot of clout and add it as a feature versus building my own thing. So like a Gnosis level or parcel level treasury system that let's say I'm in Coordinate and I want to send payment to I don't know Uniswap or something. It should be easy to like basically get their treasury information from someone who works there. I can basically go in, send it, and then have it go into like a bucket, like a project bucket or something like that. And so that I know that money is going to be spent for that specific thing. It's on chain. I can see the money being sent to contributors, and I can check on that project. I don't think you can send money to a treasury, but it's not like designated funds. You can't like say this is for this at the moment. I don't think. I might be wrong.
I'd like to build on top of that, right? It was quite interesting to see a bit of hesitation as to try to figure out who you would even pay.
Yeah.
Right? And that is the point I wanted to make, which is what I wanted to see built is companies that actually use crypto as their main income source. Because otherwise, what are we even talking about, right? Like if I have a massive DAO treasury and I want to pay my suppliers in crypto and none of them accept crypto, then it doesn't matter that there's no tools for it, right? So I think having more business in the space that, first of all, have a business model would be nice. And having those businesses have a business model that depends on on-chain payments would be even nicer, right? And then I think the space has demonstrated that we're pretty good at building tools, right? We're much less good at building business models. So I think, the tools will come when the need is there. And I think, companies like Bula will, jump in there and build a tool like the second there's a need, right? But there is no need right now. And that's because a lot of us are very focused on, treasury style, asset growth, right? Bull market kind of mentality of the number will go up and I'll sell some of that and I'll pay my dues. And nobody's focusing on making actual income as businesses. And I think that's what we should be focusing on.
It's funny because we were talking about payments and like the implied assumption is we were talking about outflows. Nobody's talking about income because just
What is the revenue model like?
Can I add to that too? I think it's important to remember that we're talking about creating a source of truth on the blockchain, and that's very powerful. And I think if you build your app or your protocol, whatever it is, around the idea of a source of truth that's shared, then you get a lot more collaboration. You get a lot more see-through, right? I can see who I sent money to at Treasury X. I can see who I billed here, and they can see it as well because they share the same source of truth. They're using the same protocols.
And just one more thing to add what Mike said earlier about the ownership economy. I think when you talk about payments, that's really important, but we also have lots of non-payment incentive mechanisms, right? So sharing ownership in a DAO, DAO-to-DAO relationships that just build an ecosystem together instead of paying everything transactional on the tiniest level. I think that's super exciting too. Probably not the topic of this panel. But aligning incentives through non-payments is, I mean, of course, we're doing this already and maybe should embrace it more.
Yeah, it's, I still want to like circle back to, because it seems that the biggest problem in payments today is like lack of business or revenue models. I don't know how much time we have left, but I'll be curious to hear if you have some ideas of like, how can we actually fix that? Like what are some things that we haven't explored and might work out?
Well, I think easier links to, sorry, my talking too much. Easier links to, if you're a contributor, let's say on YouTube or Medium, wherever, you really need a link that doesn't always be Stripe, PayPal, Venmo. It's a link to paying in crypto. And we've already developed something like that for Bulla. I'm sure other people will. That's one way to get started. I think a lot of people, it's too easy on YouTube to turn on Venmo and forget about it. So we need to offer ways for people to earn in crypto, and then the rest should follow.
Yeah, I agree with that. One thing that's making me continuously angry on Twitter is this company called ThirdWeb, which promote web-free checkout. It's web-free checkout. It's Stripe. It's Stripe. Like you click and it's Stripe, right? That's a failure. That's us failing. But what I would say is that a lot of companies in the space, us in Superfluid included, are afraid of charging. Right? Like we talk so much about public goods, we don't realize that public goods need to be built, and to build them you need money, and that money comes from people using it. And you know, we've all benefited immensely from Gnosis Safe, and they've never seen a dime, right? Now, obviously, we have our models. Tokens are a great model for that, you know, and ownership economy allows us in a lot of ways to push that conversation down the road. But I think a lot of people should just charge. They're building great products. People would pay for them. And we shouldn't be afraid of that, right? Basically, I think the kind of number go up treasury kind of model is not for every project, right? Most projects should simply charge a subscription, right? And I think making that easier, so building payment links, using something like Superfluid for subscriptions, that's obviously something I'm very keen on seeing. But then building credit on top of that, you know, basically what I want to see in 2023, 2024 is that if you launch a business in Web3, you're going to have a customer base that will pay you. They'll pay you in crypto. You'll get access to credit from that. You'll be able to do all of this in a very easy interface using Bulla, using Gnosis Safe, and you will have an advantage over Web2 businesses, and that will create a pull for more and more businesses to join. But we have to do it by example, and
Chicken and egg.
It's chicken and egg, yeah.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I think in the the bull market, everybody's token was going up, and no one was thinking about money. And then now that the money went down, we're like, oh crap, we need revenue models, but now we're scared to charge all of a sudden because it's like, who has money? So I often see a hesitancy to duplicate Web3 models, SaaS models, things like that for revenue. And I don't think that it's super rational all the time. Like you said, like not every Web3 product is going to be able to have a token or a governance or a DAO. And sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer, which is a subscription model. I think the longer we wait to, come out with these models, the more and more our users will be like taken back. I think even at Coordinate, we've discussed like different ways, and there is a hesitancy there. Like, people have been using this product for free for so long, but like, how do we even creep in? And I think to your point, it's like, just start. Like, if it's valuable enough, they will pay for it. And then also we're working our butts off in this industry, and we deserve to have some kind of money, or else it's all gonna die. So I think don't be afraid to duplicate simple models for things, and also the hesitancy. We're already doing a new thing, so everything doesn't have to be Web3. You don't have to have a complete Web3 stack. Every idea has to, we have a tendency to reinvent the wheel over and over again, and sometimes it just doesn't warrant that. And I think just being smart about what you choose to reinvent and what you choose to duplicate is probably the future of thinking about better revenue models in the space.
Yeah, and there's not much to add to these great points. I would just phrase it as like UX for mass adoption. I think that's really something we also as an ecosystem should focus on more, so that we reach more audiences, more markets, and target different customer groups that are not currently served. And I think then we have products that are proven and can also be monetized, but currently with like wallets and lacking social recovery, for example, is just like some very basic features we can technically build. And once we have that integrated and a solid stack, that where the UX between projects also is smoother, I think at that point we have a better chance for mass adoption.
Get mass adoption and get paid. That's the summary, right? Thanks everyone for taking part in the panel.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. That was fantastic. And thank you guys for coming. All right, now we have some really special guests. It's me. All right, up next, we have freelancer, payroll, benefits, and compliance. This is going to be a nice, candid fireside chat with two of the founding stewards of Opolis. Not that I don't know this off the back of my hand, but I'm going to read it anyway. First, we have Will Morgan. Will is the founding steward and chief of staff at Opolis, and the OG finance steward of Eat Denver, which, if you're not familiar with, is the thing you're at right now, where he has been driving force for both projects since 2016. Has it been that long? Does it feel like it's been that long?
Even longer.
Okay. Before diving into the world of Web3, Will led a few other lives, working in public accounting for 3 years. Is that more or less fun?
Less fun.
Okay. Traveling the world for a year as a freelance writer. Oh, I didn't know that about you. And spending 7 summers fishing commercially in Alaska. I did know that about you. All right, and Eddie Pastor is a founding steward and chief operations steward at Opolis. You also did some stuff for Eat Denver, right?
I did. Not as much as Will. I just take credit for it.
That sounds about right. Eddie is responsible for Opolis' overall financial strategy and operational direction. Eddie has been an executive in the HR tech and payroll compliance space for 10 years. Holy smokes.
Decade.
A decade.
I know.
All that with John?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. I have many questions about that. Overseeing payroll compliance in nearly every U.S. state. Oh, nearly every. Which ones are we missing?
Oh, you know, the usual. Arizona, Michigan.
Arizona. Okay. So we're going to take a little bit of a less formal approach to this one to let these two stiffs who sit behind a keyboard kind of loosen up, get a feel for things.
Nothing quite livens a crowd like talking to a finance and accounting guy, I must say. Let's have some fun here. What are we going to talk? Taxes? Compliance?
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Okay, let's start off by telling the audience what they're doing wrong. First question, what are the common mistakes that are made when freelancing in crypto or in the Web 2 world?
So I think one common mistake for anybody that's out doing anything in the gig economy or freelancing for the first time or trying to make their way into a job board or whatever is knowing how to set the correct rate, or really just knowing your worth and how to scope a project and how to properly bill for it. So having done payroll for so many years and having been on the employer side, there are a lot of hidden costs to employing people directly that you wouldn't see normally as a worker. So knowing these things really can be helpful when you are setting your rate, because if I'm a project and I want to just hire somebody direct as a W-2, I'm paying more than just the base salary, right? I'm having to pay up to 21% of additional burden with healthcare and employer taxes and any kinds of benefits. And that doesn't even count PTO and 401k match or anything like that. So I think a mistake is you think of yourself, okay, I'm $100,000 base employee, and you forget, oh, I really can mark that up. The market allows for it. I mean, the employers expect it, projects expect it. So I think knowing how to set your rate is key.
Do you have a, I know this, but I'd like the crowd to know it too. Do you have a fancy phrase for this markup?
It's called burden rate.
That's not what I was getting at.
What is it?
The self-sovereign tax.
The self-sovereign tax. That's true. That's true. It's a self-sovereign tax. I don't know if you want to call it a tax to a client. Maybe you do. It's self-sovereign fee, right? It's hey, I'm handling my own compliance. I'm handling the complexity of my employment, so you don't have to. You don't have to worry about HR. You don't have to worry about workers' comp. You don't have to worry about local taxes. I've got it handled. I'm a professional business. I employ myself, right? This is why you can pitch yourself using Opolis, because there's no compliance issue here either. You are truly a business doing business with another business. And so there's all of this value that you can kind of frame around, hey, it's good that I'm a contractor. It's good that you're dealing with me as a business and not a 1099 or a W-2.
That's a good answer. All right, now, question to you, Will. Same question, but I want everybody to know, and I know we had a few Opolis members. Oh, you have a question? All right, we'll get to that after this one. He's actually the name and face behind support at opolis.co, and so you do see the mistakes. So what would you say, what's the most common mistake that you see?
Common one I see is not treating yourself as a professional, right? So many of us that are freelancers are out there contributing to multiple different projects at any given time. But I see a lot of people, especially first-time freelancers, commingling personal funds, using a personal account on Coinbase to receive their payments from multiple clients. Best practice would be to set up a business account. Treat yourself as a professional. To Eddie's point, take the time and the energy to invest in setting up your entity in a way that professionalizes your experience with your clients. So have a business wallet address that receives your payments. Pay your invoices from that, and then receive your net pay to a personal account. Separating your personal and business is just a best practice, and we see quite often the commingling of funds gets really tricky at tax time. And so that would be probably the number one that I would say. Make sure that if you're going to be a freelancer, you separate those two.
That's a really good answer. Okay, I wanted to do you still have a question, or do you? Wait, hang on. So because there was no mic, so for the audience at home, what would the floor for Web3, is there a Web3 markup rather than a Web2 markup?
Well, I'm just trying to say, I think it's so valuable at this point that if we want to determine what the floor is for the industry, as you would for a project, I think this is where we would have that kind of discourse. So regardless of what your particular avenue is in Web3, just because it's such an emerging and valuable field, do you think that there is a minimum floor for what people should be asking for and going into any sort of interaction?
Yeah, so I'll get to my answer on that, but I think before I do, I would highly recommend that you don't have the mentality of race to the bottom. Not that you are, but for anybody that's going out freelancing for the first time might be tempted to want to feel like they need to compete with their rate. And it's not really, it doesn't need to be a race to the very bottom. Now, that said, there should be, I believe, minimum, it's sort of a substitute for minimum wage, right? There should be a floor that every project should expect to have to compensate for anything. But it kind of depends on what you do, right? So the floor, the range that you could bill for if you're a graphic designer versus the range that you should expect to bill for if you're a seasoned project manager, Scrum Master, or web developer or something, it's all going to vary. So what I would recommend is there are many tools out there, online tools, even Indeed.com, where you can get a sense of what salaries are going for in your local area, and it'll show a range, and it'll be based on experience and everything else. And so if you felt like you were just starting out and it was appropriate because you didn't have the 5-10 years of experience, you could aim for the bottom of that range. But again, I would mark that up 20%. on average to cover that self-sovereign fee of you handling your own compliance if you're a contractor, and you handling your own taxes, and you paying your own employer taxes. And that should be absolutely reasonable, especially when you point out to the client, you'd be paying that anyway. If you were to hire me as a direct employee, you'd have to pay half of Social Security and Medicare and workers' comp and unemployment. So I'm baking all that in, and you don't have to worry about it. So I don't know if that directly answered your question, if there should be a minimum. I'd say it would, at a minimum, be minimum salary exempt wage for your state. So a lot of times that's about $40,000. It's like $36,000, which you add the markup on it, so it's like $45,000 a year on average. Cut that into hourly rate if you want. But in states like California and New York, it's $50,000, $60,000. Even Colorado is a high market. So just Google salary exempt wage, and that should be your minimum.
I was just thinking about something that you said was that for the area that you live in, but like we all work in the metaverse, right? Indeed needs a metaverse section.
Yeah, so then I would probably make a case for the higher rate then. So
I live in San Francisco. That's what you're going to pay me.
Yeah, geographical arbitrage is a real thing, and I think it's one of the things to the previous panel of the unbanked. It's one of the opportunities in Web3 that people have is you can work for a project that may be New York-based, and you can live in Nicaragua and have a higher quality of life. There's no rules in Web3 to say that you can't do that, right? And so there is a level of geographical arbitrage with our DAO projects especially. I think with Web3, obviously this is our third bear market. So you see wages rise and fall. We don't have quantifiable data that says Web3 has higher rates than Web2 companies. I think generally Web2 companies are often better funded, and so we see a lot of freelancers coming in from Web2, especially with Opolis, that maybe have better and more stable funding than Web3. And I think having a sense of diversity in your clients, maybe don't contribute to just a single project in Web3, spread it out across several clients, gives you better stability. If one project fails or lacks funding, it gives you a little bit of ability to make those reasonable wages steady across the year.
So it makes me think of kind of the history of the freelancer a little bit. The term freelancer first appeared in the English language in the 1800s, and it was actually two words. It was freelance, and what it represented is a medieval knight, basically, mercenary, that really their mentality was, I'm going to work for whatever nation pays me the most. And so, initially the freelancer mentality was about getting paid more. It wasn't about going out on your own and freedom, and it was that, but there was an element of expecting to get paid the most. Now, I think to some of the points that were made earlier, you want to be excited about your project. So it's not always about earning the most either, right? So we've seen folks sort of take a lower contractor rate because they love the project so much, and then there's maybe other upside like tokens and things like that. But yeah, know your worth, I guess. You get what you put into it.
And don't be afraid to bill for projects either. So much of our history is trading time for pay. There's new models. There's ways to value project basis and jump from project to project, from client to client, where you're not having to do a steady 40 hours to get paid. Don't be afraid to negotiate a project basis contract with your clients either.
So that kind of leads to another frustration, I guess, or risk with freelancing, and it's knowing how to invoice properly and knowing when, how often, and how to set the correct payment terms, and how to properly scope that project. To lower your risk of not getting paid, you have to have a pretty good handle on that. But there are a lot of online tools for that. Opolis, if you're a member, you get a discount for Xero, which is basically a QuickBooks competitor. It's a cloud-based accounting tool. And they have invoicing, if you're invoicing fiat, and then Request Network is an option, obviously, for crypto.
Cool.
And we're looking at rolling in other things into the roadmap with our dashboard so that you can easily and quickly invoice your customers, ideally your clients, with in crypto. Hey, Valeria.
Howdy.
So we don't currently now, but
the question was, do we have a list of all the tools and other things that you can use through Opolis. Right. Complementary to Opolis. There you go.
So we don't have that quite yet, but it is on the roadmap this year to start layering in those other tools. We have a landing page right now for discounts for things like Xero, but it's a pretty deep discount. It's 75% off your first 6 months, but it's not free. And we also have partnered with Darien Advisors, who you'll hear from later today, with a special discounted rate if you're an Opolis member for your accounting, which is another common mistake for freelancers, is they maybe think they can fly under the radar, and maybe you can for a time. I wouldn't bet on that strategy long term, because I personally know people who have been found by the IRS and have to pay a lot of back tax for the years that they didn't pay their taxes.
Yikes.
Yeah, the IRS has bulked up post-COVID, and they're auditing a lot of freelancers. So not to like put the fear of God in all of in the freelancers, but the IRS has upped their game as far as crypto freelancers, people not reporting income over the last 5 years. So be compliant. Don't YOLO your taxes.
And with Opolis, there's no need to, because we handle all the withholding for you. We remit it. We convert it to fiat if you're funding in crypto, and so it's 100% compliant. We're looking at the state, local levels, and making sure those taxes get taken care of. Now, though, on your business side, you still want to keep track of your expenses. That's another common mistake that freelancers make, is they don't properly document or keep track of or organize all of their business expenses that they can write off, especially when they incorporate. So those laws change frequently. You got to kind of stay up on them, but it's easy to find out what is tax deductible. But just keeping a ledger, keeping your receipts and everything else, so that when you do hand that over to your business accountant, it's not going to cost a lot to file. And that's where our partnership with Darien Advisors comes in. They have a base rate. If you have your stuff in order, you can file a return as low as $500 for your business. If you're really organized, you could do it yourself, but again, you want to freelance. You want to be out there doing what you do best, because time is money in that sense. And so weighing the pros and cons there.
Yeah, I'll kind of actually go a little philosophical on that as well. So we've come out of an age of information, and then we had Web 2, which was just people buying our attention. I don't know about most of you. I don't have any attention left to give to anything other than the things that I'm already giving attention to. And so what's helpful as a freelancer is to find these points of curation in an age of perspective, where you have someone that can aggregate all these things to help you be compliant, to help you have benefits, to help you understand the implications of being a freelancer. Find those points that reduce the amount of attention, that reduce the amount of research, so that you can be a designer, you can be a developer. You're not having to spend your time figuring out how much taxes you owe quarterly and trying to figure out all your business expenses. Find something that curates the experience for you to free up some attention to do the things that you do best.
Is that a lull for me to ask another question?
Yes.
If you got one.
Yeah, I do.
Take live questions. I like support.
Can you tell me about your shoes?
These shoes are limited edition John Paller swag. The best
Very
in the
rare.
biz.
Exceptionally
Very
rare. What is there, like 10 in circulation?
I think there's about 10 in circulation.
Okay, I do have a serious question. And this is more relevant to DAOs that have contributors in the US, because Europe has universal benefits. Should DAOs offer employment benefits? Like, should they offer a package?
So what I think all projects should think about is how to properly compensate a consultant to include what they would have covered in terms of benefits. So my answer is yes, but not directly. I don't think they should go through the hassle of working with a broker, underwriting a plan, submitting a census, finding group coverage that makes sense, having to understand what a deductible is and an out-of-pocket max is and a copay and all that. They can avoid all the nonsense of knowing what is good quality benefits. And if you are a self-sovereign worker through Opolis, you have, that work's already been done for the client and for you. So we've already curated for group healthcare plans that are high quality, much larger networks, vastly larger networks than anything you're going to get on the open state exchange. And we could talk about that if you want to, that there's a lot to that. But I guess my short answer is they should pay for benefits, but they shouldn't necessarily offer them directly.
And then I'll chime in as well. To the legal panel, I see Ev back there, and so to the legal panel, there's some real compliance issues as well to go through the steps of incorporating your DAO and to being able to underwrite plans and to be able to hire employees compliantly, legally across the globe. It gets clunky very quickly for a DAO, and it can distract the DAO contributors from doing what the DAO contributors do best. If employment is not the purpose for the DAO, it might not make sense, and so hire your contributors as B2B relationships, and they can live, work where and with whom they want to without having to have that compliance layer from their DAO provided to them as a bureaucratic, employer historically.
And that bureaucratic mess sounds like you also would need to hire or appoint somebody internally to manage all that stuff. That sounds like a lot.
Do you want the job?
Yeah, my first nickname was HR of the DAOs, and I didn't like it. Yes?
Guys. So a follow-up question regarding, HR in DAOs. Should there be mandatory sick days and things like this? Because I think a lot of times these things kind of get overlooked because so many people in crypto are young and they forget that people get sick and, there's all these other best practices that in the United States we have, but when you have these international companies and then they become DAOs, they kind of tend to overlook these things. So what are your thoughts on this, and what's the future there?
I want to also add maternity, paternity leave to the tail end of that question.
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of articles and presentations about how employers can give more to employees to help with retention and flexibility is one of those things that's happening right now. And this is traditional employment I'm talking about. So unlimited PTO is fairly trendy, maternity, paternity leave, sick days, all of those things. There's even a discussion right now that maybe a 4-day work week could result in higher productivity. I don't know my stance on that really. I don't know that would be right for me necessarily, but I think the beauty of the future of work being independent and folks really thinking about their work relationship as a business owner is they can fit their work into the hours that they want to fit them into that where they're the most productive. And they don't have an HR team or an employer dictating that. Oh, okay, well, we've decided that 4 days is the most productive for you now. You might be able to pull that off, but I think to your point, it's really about how you scope your bill, your invoice, and how you scope your project. If you're doing it hourly, then the client would be inclined to think that, okay, well, when you're not on the clock, then I'm not paying you. However, you don't have to bill an hourly rate. You can do what a lot of dev shops would do, and they'll scope out a project and say, okay, this is going to be about $15,000 a month, and I'm going to do this work. Now you have to complete that list, right? But this is where, if you're very efficient, you might be able to pull that off in less than a 40-hour work week, and you might be able to take a week off for vacation. But you have to set the right expectations with your bill rate. Now, I guess more directly, the question was, should the DAO be thinking about that? And I think yes, but not in the traditional employer sense, but more of, yeah, I'm a business of one, I'm self-employed. I am going to have vacations, I'm going to have these things, and you're upfront about that, and you say, but I'm going to get this done this month, and I'm going to get this done this month, and you can do your contract month to month. Now, in terms of who pays for it, this is where you have to add to your bill rate, because again, they would be paying for that time off. They would be paying for that sick leave and paying for maternity leave or paternity leave. And so you could do some quick math and say, all right, how many hours is that per year, and what's my bill rate, and add that, spread it out over 2,080 hours. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Even if it didn't, we've got to move on.
Yep.
All right, just to wrap up real quick, you guys have both been, this is your 6th Eat Denver. What are you most looking forward to the rest of the week?
I always love Sunday afternoon, seeing what the Biddlers have come up with. Every year it's different. The first year it was all fun and games and unicorns and crypto kitties, and every year it's gotten progressively more compelling as far as the problems that are being solved and the things that are being built.
Cool.
So I'm really excited to see what projects we're seeing on main stage on Sunday.
Eddie?
It's going to sound weird, but my favorite part is actually the few times I get to man our Opolis booth, because I just love talking about our project. It's been my life's work for the last 10 years, and it's great to share what we're up to. And then visiting the other booths, of course, is always great. So.
Yeah, and at our booth, you get to give out some new and rare swag. Excited for that.
Better hurry, though, while supplies last.
Yes, while supplies last, but we also had a pallet of shirts.
You'd be
All right.
surprised.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
All right, up next, we have a very important one. Necessary evils, crypto and freelancer taxes. And I'd like to welcome, this is another fireside chat with Opolis Coalition Steward Micah Baylor. And Cameron Brown, who's the lead CPA and partner at Darien Advisors, a cryptocurrency and Web3 specialized tax advisory firm. He has over 12 years of experience working in public accounting, startups, fintech, small business owners, freelancers, and individuals. He has been working on cryptocurrency accounting, taxes, and compliance since 2016, and that's since before I was even in the space. Wow. And focused exclusively on the space in early 2021. He jokingly refers to himself as a DeFi degen with a CPA license. And on the note of him having a CPA license, it's very important to note he is a CPA. He's not your CPA until you hire him, right? So this is not, is it financial and not accounting advice?
Not tax advice.
It's not tax advice. That's the word. All right, take it away, Micah.
No tax advice, life advice only. Cameron and I have been doing Twitter Spaces these last several months. We've gotten into a lot of the nitty gritty of like, what is an S Corp? What is a C Corp? When do you pay taxes and why? Why do you pay taxes, Cameron? Today, Cameron, I was hoping to get into more of like the meta with you and ask more like the question like why, what, how, where, when, who, you know? Curious like your thoughts on the future of work and how these necessary evils are changing to apply to the future of work. Sir.
Where do I see it? Okay.
Where do you see the future of work, sir? In the future?
In the future, yeah. So what I kind of say, I was speaking outside as well, is like I see like a resurgence of cottage industries. It's the idea that, pre-industrialization, people would like live and work out of their home. They would, be a seamstress shop downstairs, a butcher, a fruit monger, whatever, but they also lived and worked in the same space. And I find that since the change that people commute to the office, the factories, et cetera, it's disassociated that relationship to work. And the biggest part of where I see the future of work going is autonomy, even sort of my schedule, where I do it, how I do it. So you're giving the most output per, hour spent. If I'm slogging it 2 hours on the bus every day, yeah, I might have a great, fantastic job, but I'm not doing my best life's work.
You're speaking to work-life integration.
Exactly. And it's very hard to do that through like a normal like employee relationship. So when you have the autonomy of like designing it, living, I want to go to like Honduras or wherever for like a month, like you have the option to make sure you're doing your best work.
You know, I think one of the fundamental things that is enabled when you set up like the Opolis wrapper is you start to do business, not business to consumer, where you are a business being employed by, or rather you're like a contributor being employed by a business. But instead what you do is you take your little freelancing practice and you wrap it inside of an Opolis employment wrapper, and that allows for you to operate as a business doing business with other businesses. Yeah, your thoughts on like business to business, is that the future of work?
In certain cases. So it has to work with like the flow, what you're doing, the relationship. Like a lot of people are totally cool, like working for a well-funded company, check in, check out, you know, Colgate, Palmolive or whatever. Like do your 9 to 5. Like that works for certain people. But I see the relationship engaging business to business as was a straight like transition of labor for dollar or certain benefits, is that you're not just selling your time. You're selling your IP, the risk you're undertaking, your input, your design. It's a more creative process opposed to being codified. And that's why a lot of, you know, the AV5 test was talked about earlier. It's just like when there's control over the relationship, it also doesn't allow for your little creative input to what you're doing. And all starts though, just like the other panels on legals, is like you have to have an actual entity. It's just you. The IRS is still going to see you as a person no matter what you do. You got to have some sort of legal structure in order to have the conversations of what can we do.
You're hitting some of my favorite like bullets here. You're talking about how like business to business means that like you own your IP and you are the owner. And when it comes down to it, I feel like talking about Opolis, it's really easy to get into talking about the features and the benefits of Opolis. Like, yay, you got health insurance that doesn't suck, you know? That's really nice. But then it's like, what problems are we solving? And I feel like the biggest like meta problem when it comes down to it is that ownership for the person who's actually contributing, you know? There's like 4 problems on Earth, right? There's 4 problems on Earth. There's environmental degradation, like our stuff is falling apart. There's global inequality, there's climate change, and last but not least, you have just global insecurity. And like the problem that Opolis can address the most, I think, is inequality, right? Like you look back to 1950 when the wealth gap was the smallest that it had ever been. That's when we had the highest participation in unions. And unions were a way for people to own more of their work. This being like the next iteration, what I think is like a change in the way we actually own our work. It's beautiful to think what it may be able to do for us. I think fundamentally what it does is it comes down to like that work token and allowing for people to own all of their own IP, maintain the rights of ownership, but then contribute inside of a larger collective where they continue to gain back ownership. We call it stakeholder capitalism, but you know these things.
That I do.
That you do, that you do. What are your thoughts on, I don't know, how this change in dynamic on how individuals owning things just changes the way the game is played?
Yeah, it just comes down to skin of the game. I started my first practice. We were a public benefit corp. We did the right things. We had, you know, circular feedback and good compensation structures, above market wages, like all of the classic ways to satisfy it. But I sat down with my wife and I was like, well, like, do they share on the upside of this going crazy? Like, is it just like they just put their time in, they get bonuses, which is great. Like fiat actual compensation it speaks a lot in volumes. But to have that real like input requires stakeholderism into the actual entity. So what we're doing now with Darian and we're working with other projects on is just having that little bit of skin in the game, whether it's through the contract, you own this piece of IP that's, you know, of value to that, you know, entity, that structure, et cetera. Or you just get to share in the upside and actually above and just my time and efforts, which you should be compensated for, it's that extra little bit you're getting through actual skin in, through either profits, voting, governance, bonuses, whatever.
Yeah, the benefits of ownership are maybe hard to list, right? So much of it is just like you own your stuff, you wake up in the morning more invigorated, you're likely to be working on projects that you love more. If you simply own your stuff. I think one of the things that's most beautiful, in my opinion, is that it really allows for you to do positions that are more like task-based and less like role-based. I'm absolutely horrible at anything administrative, and no one should really ask me to do things that are administrative. My main gig is like talking to people and being a person who says words out loud, and that's pretty much all I do. And you know, it's like when you are your own owner and you're contributing maybe in the DAO space or on multiple contracts, it allows for you to contribute where you like, how you like. And that's the future of work, in my opinion, is like doing what you want, where you want, when you want, how you want, with whom you want.
Yeah, it's like very akin to like a personal VC approach. Like I'm going to pick a bunch of different projects, put a little bit of time and effort in, have autonomy over, and then one pops. Awesome. But you have the freedom and the ability to choose so. And I also find just like in the concept of work itself, like I'm a father of 2 children, under the age of 3, it's tiring, but the greatest thing I can have is breakfast with my family. Like if I can carve out that little bit every day and enjoy that moment, it allows me to dive in 3-4 hours afterwards and have the most productive work session possible. So having those little like access to qualities or pleasures in life really, really changes work.
It's I know that in so many of my conversations with you, you've listed things that are not necessarily all that complicated to like go about. You just have to like know which rock to look underneath, and you have to go and just file the thing. So it seems like the future of work requires us to really like choose this mindset of abundance and to do a lot of like self-reporting, right? But if we can get over just doing a little bit of paperwork, right? We can kind of like unlock all these things. All too often, I think we're focused on like the taxes and the insurance and these types of things. What folks still can do though with Opolis and with Darian advisors is just a little bit of proper planning so that you can kind of get ahead and just live that.
Well, yeah, and it kind of comes down to like, it's the administrative BS that just exists of functioning. But through putting that little bit of time or effort, like having that legal, S Corp, whatever wrapper, is you get to have funner, quote unquote, conversation from the tax perspective, like self-employed retirement or HSAs or anything of that sort where you can just tweak your situation a little bit better where you don't have those options available to you. And it's just like having a door. You don't have to take it, but it's there, which is really nice to have through that sort of entity. It's not for everybody. You know, that's why there's a minimum for W-2 wages when you engage Opolis. There's also just the cost of doing stuff and effort. So like, it's when you feel things are real, that's when it's very important to do. And then you have to deal with the necessary evils just doing it, but it allows so many doors open. Because a regime, from the tax perspective, encourages you to take the easy way out, like work a W-2, check the box elections, I get this handled for me, my reporting's done with just like 30 seconds. But it takes that extra little bit of mile and it gets you so much further down the road as far as what you can do with it. And it's not, like I said, it's not for everybody. Like people ask me, it's no secret. Can I self-file? Sure. But the reason why engage professionals or automate it is one, your time is worth something. And also if we can find just like a marginal improvement or make something happier or better for you, we're ahead overall in the tax situation.
This is bringing to mind the concept of like professionalizing your freelancing practice. I think is largely what a lot of Opolis and Darian advisors is really focused on, is like taking something that before is maybe just a sole proprietor, a person operating with a bank account and doing a thing, and helping them professionalize that service. What you're speaking to, like this idea of like, can you file yourself? Well, absolutely, you can file yourself, but you earned X number of dollars last year by doing this many hours of work, so your hourly rate is $150, and you're gonna spend 30 hours of your life trying to do what Cameron can do in 4 minutes. You know what I mean? It's like, know your value.
Amen.
Cameron's just, he's done on that. He's like, that's right. I can move faster and meaner than you can. Do what you're good at, kids. That's really the future of work. That's the point. Do what you're good at, where you're good at it, when you want to do it. Hello.
No, it's a fantastic point. Let's do it.
Cameron, do you have words to say on the future of work? What are your I don't know, thoughts around like just the future in general?
I mean, speaking as like a old salty freelancer nomad pre-pandemic, I just see so much more people living similar lifestyles. Like, it's not for everybody. We're also creatures of nomadism, very, very long time before. So enjoy it. And having that autonomy is great.
Less suburbia, just same old day in, day out. We're moving towards just new life experiences.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Autonomy. I honestly have no clue how long I'm supposed to talk, but there's words in and around that. I feel like it's perhaps like worthy tagging things, like going back to the old Twitter and reviewing, like we have hours worth of how to write off your taxes and pay your taxes on time and all of the fun, exciting things. I don't know if you have like the goodie bag of things you want to leave with people as far as like the what. I feel like on the meta being kind of the goal of what we wanted to cover today is this vision that's been cast.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back on that too, like things to look out for, like easy conversation starters, like work with me, work with our CPA, whatever, like don't care, but like at least go into the conversation knowing what have I done? Like, is there any notable events, something crazy, I was exposed to X, whatever. And then also knowing like which degree of risk comfort. We balance a lot of times the impetus for our firm is the Darien Gap. It's like uncharted waters or uncharted land between like Panama and Colombia where you don't really know what's going on, but you got to get across it. And that's kind of the idea as well. There's a lot of signaling, there's a lot of precedent, there's a lot of similar things that have happened. But just like understanding to some degree how you feel in those conversations, whether like vaults or rapping or like what I do in NFTs, is really, really helpful in that conversation.
I feel like a lot of crypto is like the transparency aspect. So much of it is just like allowing for people to be involved in the conversation. And this idea of allowing for individuals to become like their own owner, it gives people who previously were not having like tax strategy planning, they're now involved in the conversation, right? Ultimately, the future of work, I think, should be one that's just more equal, one where more people are gaining access to business lines of credit, more people are gaining access to just like, opportunities on an equal talent pool, right? It's interesting, really, like whenever you apply for a thing as a person, you're perceived to be that person. But when you are doing business to business, you are a business, And it's like that reduces inequality. It reduces these things. So the future of work, I hope, is a more level playing field where all whom participate get to gain ownership in the value that is created. So let's make sure we do our taxes and insurance to get that covered, buddy.
Yeah, right? No, and I'll quote like one of my good partners the past few months, Ephraim Olson. They do crypto tax law. And like it's something where I firmly believe that taxes shouldn't hamper innovation. So like it's very, very complicated by design. Like it's meant to be hard. How do we file? What risks do we take? And it's like you're kind of guessing where you need to be. But it's a necessary evil in order to participate in the economy and launch a business. Like that, the whole reason the LLC exists is because we pay tax. There's the structures, the governance, the policial entities, the judicial structures to support that, all funded by taxes. So understanding that it is a relationship, like sometimes there are BS things that we get spent on or BS taxes, but it's all kind of like for some sort of benefit of being that part of that society. You can't just take all your cake and eat it too.
Are you talking about funding public goods?
I am.
Interesting. That's probably like another like conversation.
Let's go down.
The old public goods conversation, but it's interesting, honestly, with like the Opolis. Opolis's goal is to be a global public utility. Its goal is to be a public good. Previously, what you've had is owners have owned businesses, and they have put the most valuable things inside of these businesses, and then they have gate-kept these valuable tools inside of these businesses. Like if you go back to the 1940s and the 1950s, when people were being introduced to like retirement accounts inside of their union for the first time, when people were getting access to health care that would allow for them to like go get sick and not go bankrupt, people got richer and more people retired on time, and access to these services being equal and access to these services like being fair and permissionless, like it ought to be a public good. It not ought to be gate kept. So like part of me is over here talking, and I'm happy to continue paying taxes in the traditional system to like keep funding my police, and I want to be able to call an ambulance, right? Like that's important sometimes. The weather and the roads are important, but I'm super stoked, and I think we have a hard time even beginning to imagine like the world when it's different, when public goods go digital. It's the first time that a public good would be allowed to be global. Right now, public goods are kind of maintained to a region. But when you make things digital, you can just solve larger problems like access to employer services. You wouldn't think employer services is a thing that needs solving, but turns out it's pretty unequal, so it ought to be solved.
I mean, essentially what you're providing is like a social security network. It's a public good in that fashion, just a privately owned social security. So you have disability, health, and you have like, if you go out on your own and you go through like, Medi-Cal or, what's the other, oh my God, Covered California. My wife has had awful horror stories. It's a one-to-one relationship. And the simple, like why we formed Darien, even just the cooperative or just NT structures, is the purchasing power. I can negotiate when I have one friend on a rate as opposed to just myself. I take that up to scale to 10 to 50 to 500, and that conversation with insurance brokers brings it down. At the benefit of not, state care with UHC that's awful, or like your overpriced Blue Shield, Blue Health alternative, because you're operating such a larger scale, and the purchasing power together.
Yeah, collective bargaining agreements. These in the past have been done to negotiate fair wages, to get better rates on healthcare. It's always been, I think, well-intentioned, but then there's always been this misalignment in incentives where still one person is the boss, right? Like unions have union bosses. There's always like some central dude who's kind of like gaining most of the value, And then here's like the first time where we've seen a collective bargaining group that's owned by the people. It's just kind of like, I'm so stoked for it, Having had been like in the employee benefits space for so long, I came across seeing Opolis, and I'm just like, oh, you guys are benevolent to the people, you value the people, you grow the people. It's just positive sum game. So this is the future of work, right? Like just more win-win-win and less win-win-lose.
Yeah, and I think like the public benefit purpose is all. I mean, like launching wikis, education, understanding. It's something that's like, it's a fault of our current public education system where like I was doing home ec class baking muffins, but I couldn't balance a checkbook, or like how to file a 1040. And these are things that have to happen as far as like hold American passport or birth certificate. And you can bake muffins all the time, but like that's something you have to do in life. And I feel like there's a lack of education about it. Yeah, stuff gets put out, there's walkthroughs, etc. But once you understand even just the fundamental level of like, here's myself, here's my tax self, and what I can do with that in different fashions, like going out and researching, you're hiring contractors, that's tax deductible. If you're in a hobby startup, it's not tax deductible until you've actually got an entity. So it's just little things like that where you can find a little bit of edge, improvement, home office, etc. Which, every penny saved is $1 earned.
Just more good financial education for anyone who wants to hear it. Anybody with skin, sir, you know what I mean? You just come around and just hear good quality financial education. I dig it.
Thank you.
Questions, thoughts, concerns, emotional outbursts. It's sometimes it feels very difficult to know like what to talk about when you're the insurance guy and the tax guy, because it's like really broad conversations. I feel like ultimately, the goal of us is to solve problems. We go about that by setting up strange financial infrastructure and helping people make good choices. But end of the day, it's like, financial wellness for freelancers. It's about making freelancers more competitive, allowing them to access the health services that they needed, giving them a sense of belonging and place where they belong there, right? Like a sense of productivity and morale. Yeah, I'm talking about the problems we solve, sir,
Oh yeah, and it's kind of the idea of like just making life suck less as a freelancer, like really just suck less. And like I went down the process, my first startup, we had a policy with UHC, and it's like we had to engage this other guideline to do our payroll, and there's Gusto, and there's all these like people talking to each other, and it's just like overly burdensome. And then state agencies and workers' comp boards, it just like it's all thrown on you, and it really kind of burdened a lot of folks. In that respect too, so just making that part just like a little bit easier. We file taxes, making that a little bit easier. Because at the end of the day, I'm a messenger. Like, I've got to tell bad news. Like, dude, you didn't sell your Luna by 12/31. Sorry about that bad boy. But it's not me. Like, this is a public bulletin by the IRS, and I'm just iterating the bad news. So it's something where, yeah, we're here, we're accountants, just like lawyers. Like, we'll appreciate every penny you spend on us. But at the same time, just like doing that pre-work, like engaging before your end, doing your bookkeeping, like very simplistic things can have such marginal improvement on the back end to make tax compliance, all this stuff easier. Like Opolis.
Beautiful, sir. Beautiful. Yeah, you know, it comes down to like the different roles you play as a freelancer, not forgetting that you need to play the role of chief financial officer as well in your organization. My friend in the back with the hand up. Sir, what's good?
Everything. Do you have a service you can recommend that we can give to all our accounts on all our blockchains, all our wallets, and just say, hey, figure out what our cost base is, figure out what our you know, what's our tax, you know, what can we give to our accountant, so the accountant can figure everything out with appropriate numbers and not have to take, you know, 30 hours of our time trying to figure out just one of those accounts.
Thanks to the underhand pitch, we can do that. No, but like where we built our bread and butter the past few years is just like, throw me everything. Throw me your random wall addresses. Let me know what you're on. And we'll chew through it. If you want to DIY, like coin tracking is a software we use. It's fantastic. Just drop in your API keys, your exchanges, your wallets. We'll happily review it. But that's like I say, just like throwing everything out there and then seeing what sticks. And then we take like, okay, these 15 transactions this here, but it takes just having things together. But yeah, I'm happy to help you.
I think that is that. I hope you all have a little bit more sense of the future of work. Cameron, thank you so much for being here today, sir. Mr. Lapidus.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Cool. Okay. Next up, we have retirement and crypto assets, how to optimize your future with Jadza Guo. Welcome her to the stage. Jadza is currently serving as CEO of ETZ Soft, Inc. ETZ Soft offers the first employer-based retirement benefit plan that can invest in crypto. Prior to this, Jadza was formerly a VC with Lego Ventures and Foothill Ventures.
Thank you for the warm intro. And the slide deck I'll just do, okay. All right. Hi, everyone. So thank you for coming, and I see a lot of female in the crowd. And you know what's funny? The first 15 users on ETZ was female. I love you guys. Anyway, so so before I started, my name is Jazzy. I'm a founder of CEO of ETZ. And I want to take a moment to say thank you to my team and also our clients and investors, and some of them are watching a live stream right now. And without them, ETZ will not be the first B2B crypto retirement in the market ever. And so what ETZ is, we want to make crypto retirement investments simple and accessible and affordable. And how we do that is, well, first of all, the market opportunity. So the retirement market in the US is about 37 trillion. And as of today, there's almost nothing in the crypto industry. Now, it's really interesting that when we ask 80% of the US workforce wants to have their retirement and diversified in crypto. Once again, we're not asking you to put your retirement 100% in cryptocurrency. We're offering an option to actually diversify in the crypto industry. So now, why we want to have your retirement where you think is a long-term, very studied investment in this very volatile asset? Well, volatile by day, but I think over time in the long horizon is a pretty good investment. And why is that? So by the way, this slide was a Bitcoin, but now we're at Ether Denver, right? Ethereum. So if you buy Bitcoin about 10 years ago and you hold it all the way till today, you probably retire by now. And I wish I had done that. But 10 years ago, there's no ETZ in the market. But for Ethereum, 6 years ago, if you bought Ether in your retirement and hold it today, and it's 34x ROI on your investment. So think about the S&P 500 that your retirement is in today, right? So what does that even mean, invest in the future and retire well? with the inflation today, and also how low the return is on the retirement, and you actually are not really retired the way that you imagine that you're going to. So now the thing is, ETZ is the first B2B and crypto retirement where there is a platform on the market where you can open individual IRA and do everything yourself, and takes very long to opening account. But what we're trying to do here is that when you work at large firms, or even when you work at Opolis, and you actually will be offered a crypto retirement in your compensation. So it's part of your compensation while you're working for your employer. And ETZ, we capped 80% institutional degree cold storage with 320 million insurance. Now the thing is that why cold storage is so important is because imagine you have someone's retirement savings on the chain while getting hacked, right? I don't think I will be okay with myself and look at someone. And then so we keep your asset on the cold storage, and which is a fingerprint and underground with 320 million insurance. But we use that to borrow. We actually have a relationship with OTC desk where we use that as collateral, so we have on-chain liquidity to trade. So you will be trading 24/7 on the mobile apps that built very simple to use, buy, sell transaction. I made sure that my grandma know how to use this mobile app, because we're not here to teach you something fancy. And then you can trade it all day long, and with the token that we offered here, using retirement. On the very left-hand side, you see the 12,325.64. That's your retirement money, which is deferred tax. If you're in the Roth IRA, it's zero capital gain after 5 years. And also, later we'll tell you about government just offered more tax credit and to using platform like us. So now the thing is, you trade 24/7, but your assets actually in the cold storage with the insurance. That did not make me less relaxed. Anyway, woo, yeah. So now, in terms of tax advantage, I've been asked many times, well, I'm totally fine with Coinbase, and I'm gonna be client at Binance. What's the rule for ETZ? Well, the question back is that who doesn't like tax deferred, right? Who doesn't like tax advantage? The purchasing power is much more higher if you use pre-tax money to invest, especially invest in your future, which is something I truly believe that I think we should pay attention to, especially for our generation. Now, so what's the difference here? I will just quickly go over it quick. So we have 401k that you guys are very familiar with. We have individual IRA, and also the market has individual IRA and also SAP IRA. ETZ is much focused on the last two. The difference here is that for individual IRA, that you can open an account, invest in a variety of product, cryptocurrency, venture capital, all the other investment verticals. Sub IRA is actually the very new thing that's like a 401k, can be used up to 66,000 a year, and it's operate like a 401k, but it's offered for smaller corporations. So now for the employer, we have, we actually build a CRM where we give gain and loss analytics and on-demand statement, tax reporting, HR integration, and right here you can manage your KYC process, link your bank account, authorization. So this CRM we build is actually for the employers to manage your team's retirement. If you are using individual account, it will just be the mobile app that we showed you earlier. Now, very big news for us, also for you guys, is that for the Secure Act 2.0, where Joe Biden had approved, is that if you spend up to $5,000 on your retirement service, and it's actually a tax credit back to you. So it's not deductible, it's actually a credit. So the government will write you a check for whatever you spend on to figure out how to invest in your future. So please use the service like us, it's free anyway. So our area custodian today is Solera, and I have to say that we have another one, a gentleman sitting in the audience, Fortress Trust, which is another very outstanding partner, and we will be working with, and also Coinbase as well. So the team, so myself, I'm former VC and fall in love with crypto and very passionate about it, and I want to bring the TriFi and CFI to the mass market. And our other founding team member, Milo, is a former CTO in Silicon Valley Bank, and he actually built a trading desk for Morgan Stanley, and he's running about $6 billion fintech fund. And security is the #1 thing at ETZ, like I mentioned again. So our chief security advisor is 15 years at Silicon Valley Bank as a chief security advisor. So things at ETZ is heavily designed by him. And Tavi, gentleman right there, which is my best friend and my crew. And Tavi is at Microsoft IBM, and is the first person and also the best engineer I know, can build hardware, software, Web 2, Web 3, Web 2.5. And also now, crypto retirement is a highly regulated and a compliance hurdle space. So we have Mike Lambros, currently chairman of Silvergate, and he joined ETZ to lead the regulatory aspect of it. And so we have the policymaker from Washington, D.C. to tell us that what you can do, what you cannot, and to making sure we're in line with the regulators, and then to making sure we can serve you guys the best we can. So, so now, last but not the least, sorry. Yeah, so if you scan the QR code on the screen, then you can sign up for individual or employer accounts. We have a pretty long wait list, but we'll work it through. And another good news is that I actually made out this. The ETZ Baby Blue Dragon is our first NFT drop. So we made a 300 off those baby blue dragon. Well, gave it to the first 300 sign up at Ether Denver. And now, what's unique about NFT is that, honestly, I was not very fan of NFT until I realized that I would drop the baby dragon in your wallet with your retirement, and every month when you save more, this dragon grows with you. And eventually one day, we will have a market to trade your dragon, but take care of your baby dragon from ETZ. And that's her very best of hope and best wish for you. Thank you very much for your time. And we have some time for Q&A, or? Yeah, anyway.
Okay, so my question is for Opolis Employment Commons members. I'm wondering how this could be leveraged to support the Employment Commons for those of us that are saving for retirement and have a 401k account. I'm just curious how this can be used in conjunction with our already existing services.
Very good question.
So you can open either an individual account as yourself, but under your entity for what you're working for, you can open a SEP account for yourself. So a lot of, actually in the industry, a lot of people use SEPs for, especially for self-employed people. It's a really common vehicle because you get to invest a lot more. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you can, SEPs are actually really, really common for freelancers and all the self-employed people, or just even single-member LLCs, all those situations. SEPs are actually the most common tool of retirement accounts there. So it actually fits really well for this. We're also intending to use SEPs for regular employers too, that have multiple employees too. So, but SEPs are very default for the other ones.
So I'm going to add on to that. So the Opolis is actually one of the partner I wanted to grow with, because I really believe in the vision, and then is that I think they create the services for the contractor industry, which is you will not receive a lot like the corporation benefits. So what we want to hear is that we will bring the sub-IRA, which is self-employment IRA, and it is the similar benefits as a corporation, but to individual. So we will integrate with Opolis at some point, and you will see ETZ on your Opolis account. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Excellent, thank you. That's my phone. Yeah. You see the buffer corn on it? Oh, wow. Trying to steal my phone. All right, here's her contact information. Okay, up next we have the future of the firm. And I'd like to first invite up our moderator, E2T, or Earth to Travis, who has had a career exploring the future of work. So this is perfect. Currently focused on slaying Moloch and the coordinated chaos in building the Dowhouse V3 platform. We have Anastasia Angelova, is a business development and growth strategist with experience in the NFT space. Deacon Brown, who's the visionary, instigator, community backbone, full-time DAO contributor, early member of Metacartel, and summoner of Dowhouse and Raid Guild. Jacob C. ETH, who is the founder of Hyperplay, a Web3 native game launcher and aggregator of game stores. Formerly lead operations and product strategy for MetaMask and a lifelong gamer, who also leads product for Game7, DAO, and the Mantle L2 chain, and Sky Minert. You guys are supposed to come up on stage. Take your seats. Sky is a full-time DAO contributor, highly focused on DAO-to-DAO relations and supporting projects that are building what proper DAOs need to function in a truly decentralized manner. You can find him around Metacartel, DXDAO, DAOhouse, Public Nouns, Diamond DAO, Logos DAO, Hydra Ventures. It's just like, can you fit all that into your Twitter bio? all of the DAOs. Is there a DAO you're not a part of? No? Hasn't found one yet. All right, take it away, E2T.
GM. I believe in Bankless, but I am not an active contributor to the Bankless DAO. But I'm glad to be here with you all today, and hopefully we'll take it up a notch, explore where we're going with all this crazy shit that we do every day. And I'm so glad to be here with all of you big brains on the stage as we explore the future of the firm. So, live edits, I love it, I love it. I love it, yes. Moloch, we're slaying Moloch together. But I think we should start with what the fuck is wrong with firms today? Why do we need a better future? Anybody care to start with that one?
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of like, we think about, well, you made the picture, for our Telegram group was the firm with Tom Cruise. I thought that was pretty funny. So I think of like a legal firm, but really, in my past, there's firms for all kinds of things. There's, a developer or product firm is what I have history in. I think it's the employer and employee relationship that a lot of times the employees get taken advantage of. And so there may be a firm where, 60-70% goes to operations and the admin and executives, and all the people actually doing the work are getting the rest, which still may be okay, but they have no actual ownership. So I think that ownership tie-in is something that we may start to see more in the future of the firm.
Anastasia, you had a pretty hot take on kind of, historical invention that had a pretty big impact. Do you care to share something about that?
Yeah, and it's basically partially building on the previous point. So, in my opinion, one of the it's a plus side on one hand and has its negatives on the other. Historically, the invention of limited liability. And I don't mean the one just LLC in the 20th century, but the roots of limited liability company in historically. So what it sets is actually what you just said. The value is extracted from firstly, let's say what the problem is from all the stakeholders and goes to the shareholders, which usually are the financiers in one or another form, right? The plus side of it is with this, with inventing limited liability companies, like they were called very differently in the past, people would, like, the liability would go from the individual to the company. So basically the companies people would take way more risks and actually innovate. So I can give an example, so it's clear. And I think with very clear example was in the US, building the railroads. So before that, if I build a railroad and something happens, train crashes, I would be personally liable for all the debts, right? And with the limited liability corporations, I wouldn't be like, I would be able to innovate and actually be safe enough to build that railroad and not go to jail, you know, or even worse, if there is an accident.
So traditionally, firms have taken resources, their inputs being capital and humans, and they have a process, and their goal is to kind of maximize profits. Right? Do we see the profit maximization as being important moving forward in the future of the firm? Sky, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, so in terms of sustainability and things sticking around, obviously you need, you can't have systems or companies or DAOs or whatever you create. You can't just have it continually burn and lose money forever, right? However, rather than like talk negative about the way old firms work, I like to stress like the positives of the way things can work and what we're trying to figure out. And that's really like things like early ownership across, you know, it's not just the founders or the single person supplying the capital that gets to participate in the upside. The early believers, the early workers who are contributing the value, they all get a representation of ownership in that entity from the early days, and that allows you to, you know, spread that ownership across a much wider like variety and the power of token economics. So you have the users, you have the creators, you have the builders, and you have the founders, and they all hold this thing, and this is what tokens allow you to do, which was very hard in like traditional corporations, where you can give out these tokens early on. And that idea, we're still figuring out exactly how it can all work together, but that system that's created, which then starts generating value, can flow back to the early people, everyone that holds a stake, and then continue the building and the growth of that organism or that organization.
May I build a bit upon that? I totally agree with Sky here. The solution and what we see in the future, what we can take from like the DAO world and implement in like traditional companies at the moment is ownership. I would like just old school traditional equity through economic tokens. Some I can give a couple of examples of projects that are already testing, trying it out, like Fairmint, Onco, for example. So distributing those economic tokens that would give you ownership basically in this endeavor. And I would go even further. Not only like currently now the shareholders would be again the financiers, the founders, and sometimes very early like employees. I would go even further. So not only the employees, also the users, then vendors, partners. Like having skin in the game changes everything. So yeah. This like literally redefining what equity is.
Yeah, Jacob, jump in.
Yeah, so the traditional LLC incorporation, I think it's structured to essentially force that, and it's really hard to share ownership and in collective models and in community powered models. I think that as an ecosystem, like the early DAOs and like the early token airdrop type things, like we've started to make progress towards community ownership and new forms of incentive structures, but we're also seeing, where some of the challenges for us are that we're seeing the lion's share of airdrops going to airdrop farms that are run by a small number of VCs, and it's a super difficult problem to align the incentives of those who work and those who contribute and those who create value with the incentives of the broader community and the DAOs and the projects that are building them. I think that we'll increasingly see like a move towards recognition of reputation and recognition of builder contributions as maybe the most important form of signaling for ownership. And so, I can share a little bit more maybe later in the presentation about some of what we're doing on this, but I think that markets are really important to allocating and distributing capital and labor efficiently, but the current incentives and structure of them are for monopolization and extraction and conspiracy against workers and against users. And so we're seeing the internet and its early structure moving into the structure of businesses. I mean, that's essentially what DAOs are. Like, DAOs are the internet's native business model for how to structure human organization. And I think that they open the possibility of new forms of human organization and new forms of human coordination. But we're still in this early period where the models that we're creating are, in some ways, have many of the same flaws as what came before them. And we have to fight really hard to make this something that we are proud of. And Ethereum is the opportunity to do incentive design and to structure markets around fulfilling human needs and human flourishing rather than just the private accumulation of a monopoly.
Have you seen any models like in the gaming industry with different things that we might want to emulate or might want to avoid?
Well, yeah. So like the old school airdrop models, like Uniswap's airdrop was brilliant. Like you had kids who had just done a swap wake up with $4,000 in their wallet, and like if you look at the top countries in MetaMask, so I used to be lead of operations at MetaMask. Like the second biggest country at the time was Nigeria. And so these were kids that were waking up with $4,000 in their wallets. It was a life-changing event. And then, unfortunately, like since that time, like airdrops have become something that's, that has rather perverse incentives, and where, it's just like this obnoxious win token entitlement and things like that. And so in gaming and for us in Hyperplay, we really want to reward builder contributions and developer contributions. And so for some background, kind of to step back on Hyperplay, we are a autonomous entity inside of the Game 7 DAO, which was an autonomous entity which was created by BitDAO. So we have this model of a fractal DAO that creates other DAOs. And one of the other products that's inside of Game 7 that we're building with is called Summon. I guess I'm actually giving you alpha leak. It's being announced like in 2 days. Forget what you heard here. But it's a reputation protocol that allows us to reward contributions and to do multipliers on votes based on, you contributed a lot to this developer community. You also played these games and people see your reputation in that way. We're just creating like a gamification of labor and also a gamification of ownership and governance. And by multiplying, if someone makes a lot of contributions, and those who contribute the most to a project should have a greater say in the governance of a project than a speculator who maybe just has a bunch of capital and they're fly by night and they want to squeeze, short-term capital out of a project. And so we're in Hyperplay, we're consuming this summon protocol, which is another entity created by the Game 7 DAO, and using that for our future governance as well.
Yeah. Just to add to that, so interestingly, Deacon, myself, some of other people in this room, some of us have been in DAOs that have been not liquid token governance for like 3 or 3.5 years. Most of the Moloch DAO frameworks are share-based, which you earn through contribution to the DAO, time and commitment. I also work with DXDAO, which is one of the earliest. It uses reputation-based governance power, which is non-transferable. You cannot buy and sell this. The only way you can earn it is contribution of value to the DAO via proposal on chain by the DAO. This became a lot more popular when Vitalik, and team published the paper on soulbound tokens, which led to the idea of like, you don't need a liquid token, and then, well, maybe we should use that for governance because liquid token governance is dominated by rich whales. And so the cool thing is that's happening a lot more now, which is why you're making this new protocol, and a lot of other people are doing this. And Optimism has, bicameral type governance where one is liquid token, but one is, custom NFT, soulbound NFT. And so all of this experimentation is happening, but it's really has been starting since that paper, or it's been expanding since that paper was published. But we can also look back to the communities that have been doing this for over 3 years, and that side, they have to figure out how to get the capital holders involved as well. So I think the end answer is something which some communities call like governance 2.0, where it's actually a combination of the two, where you have the equity earned or the shares or the reputation that you earn in a community. And then there's also this financial capital, which is important. And it's a combination of the two in some smart mechanisms, and you can have so much experimentation in this, that governance power is in the hands of that group of people, which would most benefit your community. And it's a combination of those two, and that's probably the future. And we will see a lot more experiments in that, and I think that will help solve the problems that exist on both sides, yeah.
And our ability to experiment, our ability to iterate and to take the learnings to change and to grow and to improve. We're not stuck in these giant corporate structures that, take years and millions to actually change the direction of. I think that that's one of the most promising things about the space that we're exploring. Deacon is kind of the YOLO king, and he likes to move fast and to break shit. What are some of the experiments and changes that you're most excited about?
Yeah, I think, like with Raid Guild, the name is actually describes it pretty well, because Raid Guild itself as a DAO is more of this kind of fuzzy meta concept. It has a treasury, it manages it, but it's never raised capital in any way. But every member inside forms raids, and sometimes that raid is their own company, and they're going to go work for a client. And then Raid Guild acts more as kind of this business network, or it's more of there's a lot of power for freelancers to have a good network, and so that's one experiment I think that was. We see that all over the place now with kind of this larger fuzzy kind of DAO, like what you're saying, and then these kind of sub-DAOs that are underneath it, or companies or LLCs or whatever they are. Recently in Public House, which is kind of the DAO house governing DAO, we're doing something with retroactive rewards and kind of a liquid token, so kind of the two token thing you're talking about, where there's kind of open staking periods, which would be open for anyone who has the token. But then there's also retroactives, which are signaled by the current members to reward the builders, the developers, any contributions in the space that are even like on the edges of the space, but have added value. So you have like, you can get a little more of that reputational-based power out to people. I think through retroactives is a really cool way.
One of the things that we haven't touched on is sovereignty, and that's an important concept in the space. Does anybody have a why that's important, and then maybe a how, you know, we can encourage that moving forward?
Do you mean sovereignty of like individuals or organizations? Do you want to say it?
Wow, that's actually a very important question.
So like, for example, so the original idea behind BitDAO was a fractal DAO. So it was a DAO that would join together with other projects in the ecosystem to co-create autonomous entities. And we say autonomous entities, not sub-DAOs, because they're not subordinate to the original DAO. They're DAOs with distinct cultures, autonomy, goals around the things that they're doing, and BitDAO would co-invest with other projects and would create these new DAOs. And so, for example, Game 7 was a DAO that was co-created by Forte and BitDAO. And then Game 7 went on to form, you know, is now launching 2 new products here at ETH Denver, Hyperplay and Summon. And, you know, those products will go on, and we're gonna contribute a lot of new open source products that come out of Hyperplay and things like that. And so we're creating this fractal of many different DAOs, and we use tokens to align incentives around those. There are some of the hardest problems are figuring out how in this fractal ecosystem do we accrue value back to the original DAO, because the treasury of BitDAO has grown quite substantially. The price of its token isn't always directly correlated with that treasury growth. And so there's a lot of interesting work that's being done now to figure out how we tie the incentives of the DAOs to each other and align incentives, you know, with each other, while also still having autonomy of action and distinct cultures and distinct goals and things like that. But it's created a really diverse ecosystem of products, and we're also building a layer 2, which is called Mantle, which is a layer 2 that's meant to serve all of these different products that are being incubated, and to basically to help bootstrap a community governed layer 2 on Ethereum.
Sky, I know decentralization is an important concept to you. How does that apply and guide kind of the future of the firm?
Yeah, so rather than what we've seen in the last 15 years, we have especially in the internet age, when you put capitalism together and you put the internet and free markets, like it just made sense that there were these giant centralized organizations, a few of them that build up and control everything. And then we see most of the negative things that come from that, like centralized databases that all get hacked, like they can shut your account down, censorship. Yeah, there's tons of negative problems. It's easier to think about those because we're all aware of those. The opposite of that is the decentralized version of that, and it was impossible to have truly decentralized versions of these organizations without blockchain, because you have to do this on a blockchain. You can do some of the things to decentralize these systems, but if you don't have blockchains and DAO tooling, you basically can't own the protocols, the front ends, the things that these organizations are doing. And so now that we have blockchains and we have DAO tooling, we are starting to do the decentralized version of these, and that allows you to eliminate all of the negative things that come with the centralized versions. Whether or not they can be as competitive, right now they're probably not. It's harder, it's more expensive. There's a decentralized financial system you can use today. It is harder to use and it is more expensive than the centralized version. But depending on who you are and where you are in the world, like a lot of us use it, and we're willing to pay that cost and figure out how to use it. And eventually more people, as it becomes easier, will also do that. The fact that it exists today, and you can go bankless, which Bankless DAO is leading, right, is pretty amazing. It's just hard and more expensive right now, but the fact that it exists is amazing.
So Anastasia, you know, you've come back from the future and you've seen where we're going. You know, what does that look like to you? What are your hopes for our future?
Oh, my hopes are like firstly, all those amazing projects here, like all the DAO tooling that Sky just mentioned that we saw in the previous panels. Like I'm more on the user side, well, builder, but also on the user side, contributing to a bunch of DAOs at the moment, and I see the same problem everywhere. You have so many tools. Like yes, they need they're all building, they're all progressing, innovating, and so on. One of the most important things is for them to be able to work with each other, so we can plug in one into another. You don't need to have everything in one. Like I see that all the time. Like we're building this and we'll have that and that and that. Like we'll have reputation here on top of that and then like Discord and so on. Do what you're good at and make it interoperable with other tools. And then users will just come. They'll use what they need. They'll take from everywhere what they need and just plug and play. This is what I see for the future, honestly. So if we do that, so many things like will be. I don't say that DAO tools like nothing is enough. Like we're gonna innovate. Further tests, we're literally in the testing phase. Everyone's testing. I'm testing a bunch of tools myself at the moment. So yeah, guys, if you have tools, honestly, I'm seriously, I'm not technical, but technical enough maybe to like just test for different purposes. So if we have that, we'll have reputation. Like we have the concepts already, we'll have it solved. We'll have liquid and illiquid tokens. We'll have, for example, for reputation, one thing they're like not only reputation being illiquid, in my opinion, it should be also dynamic. So we already have the technology, we have the dynamic NFTs that can solve that. So for example, if I've been a super duper contributor of a DAO, you know, the first few months and then I just disappear, it's like something changed. I shouldn't lie on the same, you know, equity, let's say, same ownership and same rights in this DAO. It should change. So someone else that have taken over, why not? Like it should be like we already have it. So yeah.
Before Josh shuts us down, one really important thing in the future of the firm, and this, you know, with Opolis, with DAOs, with Web3, is when you used to work for a company like Exxon, you could only work for Exxon, right? You maybe had some hobbies on the side, but we live in a world now where you can actually work for 25 different organizations, even ones that compete against each other. You can contribute, you can move around, and I actually recommend that people are not in one DAO. Some people are just in one DAO, and you shouldn't just be in one DAO and concentrate. I like the 80-20 rule. Like even if you're one DAO and that's all you care about, spend 20% of your time in other communities, in other DAOs. You will learn more, you'll bring ideas, it will help your main organization more, and you can float between all of them. And you can, if you don't like one, you can go to another one. And that is impossible in the old Exxon past firm world, and now in the future firm, you have full freedom and interoperability and open.
So be like Sky.
Thank you for the filibuster, Sky. That was a great way to close it out. Thank you, guys. Round of applause for this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I let them drag on because we had a special. I gotta jump out and jump back in. We had the original panelist who had just got here off of a plane and like made it literally just in time. He just got out of his Uber. So that was Spencer Graham, whose bio I don't have in front of me. CEO, founder of Hats Protocol, a founder of Hats Protocol, early contributor to DAO House and Raid Guild. Moderating the We Made the Jump, You Can Too, if he's here. Above Average Joe, are you here? Okay, I may have to sub in a moderator. Sky, don't go anywhere. David Hunt Mateo, aka Mantis Clone, who's a full stack Web3 developer and is full time at Request Network. Also contributes to Bankless DAO, Talent DAO, Ocean DAO, Raid Guild, Developer DAO. Wow, you're all over the place. You must know Sky all over the place. And Willie O, who is the head of decentralization for the Fox Foundation, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to supporting Shapeshift DAO in achieving full decentralization. So this is like the quintessential, we made the jump, you can too. I'm hoping that's the pitch he makes. You guys want to come on up? And the early panels, everybody came up when I called the names. In the last two panels, you guys just hung out down here. All right, grab your seats. Above Average Joe, are you here?
Thank you.
That's okay. You want a sub? No? Making the jump to Web3?
GM.
All right,
GM,
Sky.
everyone. Yo, yo.
There you go.
Flip to the other side. These are mostly my friends too, so I can ask good questions.
Hey Toad. Hey Sky.
So, hey, so I'm assuming you already they're all introduced. You all used to work for corporations. At some point, you discovered Web3, and now you all work, I think all of you, at least two of you, and maybe all three of you work full-time in the decentralized DAO world. And I would like to hear briefly from each of you why you made that jump, starting with Spencer.
Starting with me. I have a very general answer that I think everybody has probably heard 700 times, which I can give, but maybe I'll give the more specific answer, which is that at the time, the thing that actually both really got me into Web3 and then really got me into Web3 was that I was working as a product manager at a big giant corporate healthcare company called Optum. Probably the most bureaucratic thing I've ever experienced beside like government itself. But I was working in this particular area on a particular product that led me to realizing the power of smart contracts. We were working on payer and provider contracts. And I was realizing, oh, smart contracts could make all of these problems go away tomorrow if we could just figure out how to do it in this particular context. It wasn't possible for a lot of reasons, but I learned a lot about what smart contracts were from that, doing a lot of research. And then it was realizing that I wasn't going to be able to help make that happen from inside of this big giant corporation. That ultimately helped me realize that I just needed to leave and go work in Web3, and ultimately that led to me quitting and joining a few DAOs, and that's my specific reason.
Do you want to moderate?
Last minute as always,
Thanks,
like
Sky.
all ETH Denver stuff.
Welcome, Joe.
Sweet. Okay, so I've had exactly no time to prep, so dive in where you left off and I'll do my best.
Sweet. All right, I'll talk about how I got into Web3 and made the jump. I'll try and be brief too. This started back in my first corporate job was dropping out of CU Boulder as a student to start up my first startup, which was a legal tech startup. Did that for about 5 years and ultimately ended up selling that at the end of 2017. And it wasn't a big win. We paid back the investors and it was a small win for the team. That same month, I started Bitfract, which throughout 2017, I've been getting very crypto curious. And so the same month that we sold Just Legal, I started a tool called Bitfract with some friends because we saw a problem in the space. And it was the first tool where you could trade Bitcoin for multiple digital assets at once. And it was built on top of Shapeshift. So 6 months later, Shapeshift acquired Bitfract. I moved back to Colorado. And I worked at Shapeshift as a principal product manager for about 3 years before we made the jump ourselves as a corporation and decided to decentralize. When I heard from Eric and John, the CEO and COO, that we were going full DAO, it was like the best day ever, which I say that every day, but truly, it was the best day ever. I jumped out of my chair and I was like, woo! I was so stoked. And part of the reason that I was so excited about this was that I had been at ETH Denver 2020, did a hackathon project called Cause, which was the DAO to save the world. And met Griff Green that day, and Cause ended up becoming basically the new version of Giveth. So it was right during the pandemic. I had a lot of time to spend basically building the new version of Giveth as a decentralized community. And it blew my mind because Giveth had such a powerful meme of rewarding those who give. It was a vision that I had been dreaming about for years. So I met the Giveth team, and I'm like, this is perfect. We have the same vision. And then other people all around the world heard the Giveth vision and were like, oh, I also want to help save the world. Like this, and you guys are a DAO that's just building this, and I can just jump in Discord and get involved and add value. And it worked. Like we just saw this community grow. If anyone's ever used Giveth, you know it's a really awesome app with great UX. It's got over 2,000 projects around the world where you can donate to them with crypto with no added fees. And that was built by a decentralized organization. So meanwhile, I'm working at Shapeshift. We see DeFi Summer. We see all these awesome DeFi protocols that are structured as DAOs. I had seen firsthand the ability of DAOs to coordinate and to ship beautiful, amazing products. And so I actually want to give a shout out to James over here, because Shapeshift had a chat with him and Cooper around how do we make Fox like more of a governance token? What's the best thing we can do with Fox? And that was a very inspirational conversation where they were like, the best thing you guys can do is to decentralize Shapeshift. And at the time, we weren't even sure that that was possible as a corporation to do that. I remember Eric and stuff was worried that there might actually be like some legal risk of doing that. Sure enough, the lawyers actually came back to us and they were like, no, actually, like this is probably one of the best things you can do is like decentralize. That'll actually put Shapeshift in a safer position. And so after that, it was like full speed ahead. And yeah, now we're a little over 18 months into this decentralization thing. And I can say, even though there's a lot of like skepticism around DAOs, that we are objectively spending less, a lot less. We are earning more revenue, and we are shipping faster than we ever did as a centralized organization. So, no regrets.
That's incredible. I'll jump in next. My journey into Web3 kind of started on a little bit of a darker note. Near the end of the pandemic, I was working at a small startup that was working on speech recognition technology, and mostly because the business wasn't the best run, I ended up getting laid off from that job. So I was floating, you know, immediately without healthcare, immediately without any sort of income, and I, in that moment, just decided that I wanted to look into this Web3 stuff. I saw the number of job postings all over LinkedIn for crypto-related stuff, and I was like, there might be something here. So like, I'm gonna go check it out. That was at the start of 2021 is when I started. And I signed up to join the incubator called Kernel, spun out of Gitcoin. And I managed to get into Block 2, which was, you know, one of the earlier blocks. And from that, I was able to explore all of the different aspects of Web3 that interested me the most. I was able to divine down what motivated me, and really some of the things that really motivated me the most was the ability to shift your focus between different things and participate in multiple DAOs. I think that being locked into a specific role in a specific company for years on end was something that was extremely painful to me over the course of my career. And this new opportunity to just like branch out and explore was really appealing to me. I was also super interested in just the parts of Web3 that promise better privacy and better data sovereignty and ownership over our digital lives. I think that is something that really motivated me. So I kind of just jumped in headfirst and never looked back. I started with my kernel adventure, and then I just started applying to a bunch of different jobs working in Web3. And luckily, I was able to get one working with the Ocean Protocol Foundation. I worked for them for about a year, just over a year. Then I spent about 5 months just freelancing amongst all the different DAOs that I could find. And now, more recently, I'm working at the Request Network Foundation, building the ability to store immutable payment requests in IPFS and then hashing them onto Gnosis Chain so that we can build all sorts of cool accounting and compliance primitives for Web3.
Awesome. So I apologize if this is something you guys have already talked a little bit about, but
that was the first
I want
question.
to know. Awesome. When you made the transition full time, was there any moments that you guys had doubts about whether or not you'd make it? And if you did, how'd you overcome?
For me, no. I think it's because I waited too long. I waited until I had both a kind of way to do freelance work through Raid Guild. If I ever needed to pick up more, I could. I also waited until DAO House was really starting to ramp up its activities, and there was like a fair amount of near full-time work to do. And I also waited until I was able to get health insurance as basically a freelancer through a little thing that you guys might have heard about called Opolis. I don't regret anything about the way I did it, but if I were to change one thing, it would be to make the switch sooner. And I might have had a little bit more uncertainty about what I was getting into, whether it was going to work out, et cetera, et cetera. But the experience of switching and being in this space has been so rewarding that I wish that I had done it even a couple days earlier. Would have been nice.
For sure. What about you, my friend?
Yeah, I similar to you, I had like 0 reservations. So by the time that Shapeshift made the decision to decentralize, I had already been contributing to Giveth for over a year. So I had seen firsthand that it can work. And yeah, when there was a lot of employees though at Shapeshift that were very concerned. So I remember the day that Eric basically announced to the company, like, we're going full DAO, I gave a presentation to try and paint the picture of like, here's what the DAO could look like. Because a lot of the employees, and you can imagine there were like 45 full-time employees, very varying understandings of DAOs, and there were some employees who had like just only heard of the concept and still kind of thought it was like a fantasy and not realistic. So I tried to first paint the picture of like, here's what the DAO could look like, to try and put some people at ease right after that really crazy announcement that was basically like, hey, the whole company is getting laid off like over the next 6 months, right? And then I made it a goal for myself to try and convince as many Shapeshift employees as possible to just give it a try. We all got severance, and I'm like, look, like, I know it sounds crazy, but like, please just like give it a try. You like the day that your job ends at Shapeshift, you can come back to work on Monday and like contribute to the DAO in like a very similar capacity, or figure out a new way that you want to contribute. You know, it's all up in the air now. It's all possible. And fortunately, we did have a lot of employees who decided to make the switch. Not everybody, but yeah, definitely want to give a shout out to Opolis, because that was a big part of what basically made these employees who did have reservations feel a lot more comfortable about still being able to basically get paid in fiat and get a mortgage and get health insurance and all that good stuff. Yeah.
I'll say that my journey had a lot of doubt and a lot of adversity along the way that I overcame. Mostly in the way of just like my family was very skeptical about the whole thing. I am the sole earner for my family of my wife and my son, and this idea of just like completely pivoting my career into a new technology, as well as at the same time starting up my own business, you know, with Opolis, and at the very same time starting remote work for a foundation that was located halfway across the world, was a lot for them. and it took a lot of like steely resolve to just kind of like push through and prove to both them and myself that it was possible to make this sort of work arrangement sustainable and have fun doing it. One of the things that was really really motivated me to make the jump actually was when I got laid off from my company in 2021. I don't know if it was like a misunderstanding of how Cobra worked or whatever. If you're familiar with Cobra, it's like the insurance that you get in between employers. But they wanted me to come into the office and drop off a check every month for my health insurance, which was ridiculous because they laid me off. I was kind of pissed at them, you know. So I had to continue to see them every month after that for like 3 months straight. It just sucked. So that whole experience really showed me the lie that is having a single employer lends stability to your life. I think that in today's world, there's near zero loyalty between company and employee, and that if it's what's best for the company, that they'll lay you off in an instant. Oh, the other thing that I forgot to mention was that I got laid off like 2 weeks before Christmas. That was like was the worst.
I got laid off on my birthday once.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
And at DAOs, nobody can lay you off, right?
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
For sure.
But I mean, with DAOs, you can diversify your workload so that even if you do get laid off by one group, it really doesn't affect you that much because you can lean into the other communities that you're already part of.
At Shapeshift DAO, we don't call it firing or laying off. We just you stop getting paid, but you can still contribute if you want to.
For sure. Okay, so I look at most of us here in the crypto industry that have taken that leap to full time as heroes of this Web3 world. And every hero has a journey. And usually right near the beginning, there is a point of no return where you know you're never going to go back. What was that moment for you guys?
I don't know if there was ever a single point for me, but there was a period between ETH Denver 2020, when I did my first hack, and like maybe July, where during that time, I joined Raid Guild. I started doing a bunch of stuff, started experiencing what it was like to be in a DAO that was counterintuitively so supportive and friendly and close. Somewhere in there, I figured out that I wasn't going to do anything else ever again.
I'd say for me, I remember DevCon 2018 was like a definitely kind of a life-changing moment and gave me. It was the bear market, so like people are starting to have some doubts and stuff. Shapeshift as a business was starting to struggle because we'd implemented KYC. But I went to DevCon 2018 and I saw just like all these amazing builders. That's where I met Giveth for the first time, and I'm like, these people are gonna fucking change the world. Like they've raised a bunch of money. There's a bunch of nerds building cool shit. Like I have no doubt that they're gonna change the world. I think every Ethereum conference I went to afterwards, like every time it just gives me more conviction because I get more and more bullish, especially during these bear market conferences where it's all builders. But yeah, so I remember when I accepted the role at the Fox Foundation, at that point I was like, this is the last. I want to just work for DAOs going forward because I love it. I never want to be a CEO again. It's very lonely being a CEO. There's a lot of pressure. You feel like you can never really take a vacation because there's just an endless list of shit to do. And you got investors, you got a team counting on you. So yeah, I think going full DAO going forward, and when I took the role at the foundation, I'm like, all right, this is the last time I'm going to work for a corporation again.
I think for me, the moment where I realized that I wanted to spend the next however long on working on a Web3 was that I was in a talk at the Kernel Incubator where they were discussing the gravity of this concept of being able to create programmable mechanisms that grant incentives for actions that benefit the network, and it compared it to a development on the scale of like human language itself. Is like this is a whole new way to tie value to our words and to create games where you can influence the behavior of society as a whole for the betterment of society. I think is the way we should be building it, but and that just kind of blew my mind. It just blew my mind that was something that was not only possible, but like already being worked on by so many different people. Because I joined the space in 2021. I mean, these guys next to me are OGs compared, and it's been a whirlwind ever since. I love learning about tokenomic design. I love learning about privacy tech and trying to change the way that the world works for the better. I couldn't see myself doing anything else for now.
Awesome. So there's probably a few people here that haven't made the jump yet, and they might be on the fence about it. What would you give them as advice to front run the issues that you guys experienced, and how was that impactful for you? Like, if you could front run your own scaling problems from your journey, what would you give them?
Yeah, so just to Sky's point in the last panel, like you can work for multiple different DAOs, right? And so that also means if you are still have a full-time gig and you're not in Web3 yet, like you don't have to quit your job and then go find a new role in a DAO, right? Like you can just jump into Shapeshift Discord or any of these projects, Request, Hats. Like you can start contributing, you can get involved, and you can add value and even get paid before you leave your role. And if ideally, like you can set it up so that it's a really seamless transition. And that you're not just jumping out into the blue, but you're jumping into a role that's already ready to go. Obviously easier during a bull market than a bear market to do it, but I say there's no excuse. Like if you're interested in doing it, bear market's a great time to get involved with a lot of these projects. And then, like worst case, by the time the bull market comes, you've already got all this experience, you're ready to jump into a role. Because yeah, when the bull market comes, there's going to be a ton of demand for people who like not just understand crypto, but understand like what it's like to work in a DAO. And there's not going to be enough people who know how to do it. So it's going to be a good position to be in.
I don't know if this is advice that I would have needed to hear or anything, but I think it's still relevant. Don't underestimate your skills and the value that your skills can provide or can create for existing organizations, existing DAOs, existing communities. There's like a lot of very specific skills that exist in this space, but all the skills that you have from whatever you're doing are going to be relevant to somebody somewhere and probably a lot of people. I think the most concentrated form of that is within service DAOs, where service DAOs, there are service DAOs for like Web 2 like things that are DAOs. Raid Guild is, well, Raid Guild does Web 3 development, but it's like kind of like a Web 2 dev shop, but it's organized as a DAO. So you can do things that you're doing today in your job in the context of a DAO. Yap DAO is the same thing, but for PR. And there's many others as well. So don't think that you need very, very crypto specific skills to be able to work in DAOs and find your place here.
I'd just like to real quickly echo what Willie said. I think that one of the things that I would advise people to do is like figure out a transition. Like you don't have to quit your job right away. And I'm probably one of the outliers of like jumping headfirst in, and it caused a lot of stress, honestly. So I think I agree with your point that it's good to like keep your day job, find your role in a DAO, start to ramp up and try to make the transition a little bit more smoothly. Oh shoot, I forgot my other point. Never mind.
That's all good. I guess I'll wrap it up by saying, if you're not bullish on DAOs yet, you should be.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And don't forget to grab a shirt on the way out if you didn't get a cool one on the way in. And lunch. Okay, instead of AMA, because we did a little bit of a slow start in the morning, I'm just gonna let John, the founder, dive into a little bit of vision casting and Megalopolis. And one last thing, the shirt I've got on, Unemployable. This is just a quick plug for our podcast, Unemployable Pod. I'm unemployable, and if you're here, you probably are unemployable too. So you can grab an Unemployable shirt.
Thanks, dude. Those shirts are great. Yeah, so if you don't know about our shirts, hey, James. What's up, dude? We use like the softest thing on the planet, and you like want to sleep in them, wear them all the time. We kind of do it intentionally, so pick them up on the way out. All right, so we're going to talk about Megalopolis. We're actually not going to get into it. I'm just teasing right now because we're actually doing the full rollout of this. So if you hadn't noticed, payroll, benefits, and compliance and tax payments is really boring shit. Sucks. Okay, so in order to make it a little fun, we've created a storybook canon. So we've actually created a whole world called Megalopolis, which is the refuge for the self-sovereign worker that happens to live in the ethereal galaxy. So you're going to learn more about that. And then the second piece of this is the Order of the Opus Guay. So if you follow any Dan Brown stuff, there's Opus Dei, right? Work of God. Well, this is Opus Guay, which is small work, right? So Opus is Latin for work, and Guay is the smallest unit of account in Ethereum. So these are the grand protectors of the Megalopolis ethereal community. So this guy right here on my hoodie, his name's Griff. There happens to be a real life Griff that happens to be a fighter for the self-sovereign worker, but that's another story. But in any case, we've got a whole storyboard of this stuff that we're going to not announce, but show you at opening ceremonies on Thursday evening. So if you want to know more about it, if you want to know how to join the Opus Squad and become essentially the Jedi for the Megalopolis community, talk to David over here. That's Kitty Slasher, for those of you that don't know. What? Yeah, except your name's weird. Slasher. Joking. Okay, so in about 2 seconds, I'm going to hit, and now I'm being called. Stop. Leave me alone. I'm busy. They don't care. I'm tweeting as we speak, and if you follow me, like the post and retweet, I'm going to randomly pick somebody to upgrade them to Spork Whale status for ETH Denver. So give me just a second and I'll finish that. But keep an eye up. So that's from my account, at Pallerjohn, okay? So just give me 1 second and I'll do that. Tonight, the Bufficorn Biddle Brigade is hosting an event called Buffalaughs. We've got a whole evening of tomfoolery and ridiculousness. We might even have some roasting going on. Who knows what's going to happen? That's going to go from about 8 to 10, and then afterwards we've got Big Bed Machine spinning DJ beats all night until about 1 o'clock. Right now, the way that it's ticketed is BBB holders actually get free entrance, and then it's $52.80 to come if you want to pay. But because you're here, you also get free entrance. So if you go to the page, where's the page code? Oh, at the door. So, okay, so bring this code to the door, original Bufficorn 5280, and you can get free entrance to Buffalaughs tonight. So that means you also don't have to own the Bufficorn Biddle Brigade NFT if you don't want to. What's that? I know. I haven't finished it yet. I'm multitasking. Thanks. I will finish it in just 1 second. So again, thank you to all the partners and sponsors of the mini summit symposium on the future of work. The amount of knowledge and wisdom and experience that was dropped today in like a half a day is pretty remarkable. I mean, the amount of progress that's been made in the future of work over the last 3 or 4 years in Web3 has been staggering, quite frankly. I can't wait to see what happens in the next 3 or 4 years. Who knows? We'll have 100,000 people at ETH Denver next year. Why not? And that's about it. So we've got to clear out the room here shortly for the next mini summit coming in 1 hour. So please grab food and get it out of here. Even if you got friends that are hungry, take it. We don't give a fuck if you do. So just take it and grab your t-shirts on the way out. We do actually have other swag showing up at the main event, so stop by the Opolis booth, stop by our partners' booths for other cool stuff, and we'll see you around. Thanks, guys.